Shabbat Shalom to everybody. Praise Yahweh for another wonderful Shabbat. We just got a few greetings here. Came in just before in worship or after. Carol saying Shabbat Shalom. To you all who love Yahweh, Yahweh blesses and guards his trustworthy ones. Be strong and let him fortify your heart, all you who are waiting for Yahweh as we continue to make him great together. Carter saying Shabbat Shalom on the first Sabbath of the 9th month. Yahweh is great and awesome. May we have a blessed Sabbath in his presence and eat the bread of life from his table. Amen. Rochelle from Minnesota saying, I pray you all have a wonderful Shabbat together. And Mandy saying Shabbat Shalom all. Jillian, Shabbat Shalom. And then Jackie Ferguson, not our Jackie that's here, saying Shabbat Shalom all. And so praise Yahweh. And all the others that are watching, you're welcome to send a greeting. Let us know that you're online with us. Always encouraging to hear, and also that we continue to see our Master knitting us together according to his design. So we are in the Bemiṭbar. We're in the wilderness, in the book, and we are reading chapters 8 to 12 today as we learn some wonderful lessons again on who we are in the Master and our responsibility of being the light of the world as we let our good works be seen by all. So Kayla's ready there with chapter 8. Okay.
And Yahweh spoke to Moshe, saying, Speak to Aaron and say to him, When you ascend to trim the lamps, let the 7 lamps give light in front of the lampstand. And Aaron did so. He set up the lamps to face toward the front of the lampstand, as Yahweh commanded Moshe. And this is the work of the lampstand, beaten work of gold, from its base to its blossoms it is beaten work. According to the pattern which Yahweh had shown Moshe, so he made the lampstand. And Yahweh spoke to Moshe, saying, Take the Levites from among the children of Israel, and you shall cleanse them, and do this to them to cleanse them. Sprinkle water of sin offering on them, and they shall shave all their body, and shall wash their garments, and cleanse themselves. And shall take a young bull with its grain offering of fine flour mixed with oil, while you take another young bull as a sin offering. And you shall bring the Levites before the tent of appointment, and you shall assemble all the congregation of the children of Israel. And you shall bring the Levites before Yahweh, and the children of Israel shall lay their hands on the Levites. And Aaron shall wave the Levites before Yahweh, a wave offering from the children of Israel. So shall they be for doing the service of Yahweh. And the Levites shall lay their hands on the heads of the young bulls. And one shall be prepared as a sin offering, and the other as an ascending offering to Yahweh, to make atonement for the Levites. And you shall have the Levites stand before Aaron and his sons, and then wave them, a wave offering to Yahweh. Thus you shall separate the Levites from among the children of Israel, and the Levites shall be mine. Then after that the Levites shall go in to do the service in the tent of appointment, when you have cleansed them and waved them as a wave offering. For they are given ones to me from among the children of Israel. I have taken them for myself instead of all who open the womb, the firstborn of all the children of Israel. For all the firstborn among the children of Israel are mine, both man and beast. On the day that I struck all the firstborn in the land of Mitzrayim, I set them apart unto myself. And I have taken the Levites instead of all the firstborn of the children of Israel. And I have given the Levites as a gift to Aaron and his sons from among the children of Israel, to do the service of the children of Israel in the tent of appointment, and to make atonement for the children of Israel, that there be no plague among the children of Israel when the children of Israel come near to the set-apart place. Thus Moshe and Aaron and all the congregation of the children of Israel did to the Levites according to all that Yahweh commanded Moshe concerning the Levites, so the children of Israel did to them. And the Levites cleansed themselves and washed their garments, and Aaron waved them a wave offering before Yahweh, and Aaron made atonement for them to cleanse them. Then after that the Levites went in to do their service in the tent of appointment before Aaron and his sons, as Yahweh commanded Moshe concerning the Levites, so they did to them. And Yahweh spoke to Moshe, saying, This applies to the Levites. From 25 years old and above, let them come into active service in the service of the tent of appointment. And at the age of 50 years they retire from active service of the service and serve no more. But they shall attend with their brothers in the tent of appointment to guard the duty, but shall do no service. Thus you shall do to the Levites regarding their duties.
Okay, so this week's Torah portion is called Beha'alotheța, which means when you ascend, and it was directed to Aaron as high priest in his required duty to trim the lamps. And the root word that this phrase comes from, when you ascend, is from Allah, which means to go up, to ascend, to climb, to be exalted, or to offer. And these are the clear instructions that Aaron's given to trim the 7 lamps of the menorah, the lampstand that was in the set-apart place, and to give light in front of the lampstand because it would shed light on the showbread table. And it was his duty as high priest to set up the lamps as Yahweh had commanded Moshe. And this is this whole Torah portion, everything that we go through in terms of service in the tabernacle was always a clear pattern that was to be followed, because it was a clear reflection of that which is in the heavens. And so we see that this duty of Aaron as high priest is a wonderful shadow picture of the work and duty that our high priest forever in the order of Melchizedek, Yeshua Messiah, has done for us in ascending into the heavenly tabernacle through a complete obedience to the Torah. When he was here in the flesh of man, he said, I've only come that which my Father has commanded me to do, because he came to do exactly according to what was required in order to facilitate a proper order of Melchizedek forever, that we can be a nation of servants, And so we can also see how he too, going into the heavenly tabernacle to take his blood and put it on the heavenly tabernacle, which the blood of bulls and goats were only shadow pictures of, he has, by him performing this work as becoming high priest, highlights a clear picture of the one who trims the lamps and sets up the lampstand, as the revelation that we see in Chazon given to Yochanan, that Messiah himself is the one who walks amongst the lampstands, the 7 lampstands. So it's a clear picture of the high priest set up the lamps, trimmed the lamps. Now the lamps are to shine the light. And it's a reflection of who we are as a body, branches of the root system that are firmly planted in the rock of our deliverance, Yeshua Messiah. And the lessons that we learn from this, and the requirements for us to be making sure that we are no longer in the darkness, walking in the dark ways, but we are now in the light of him who loves us, and we are remaining in that light as we guard the truth and shine the light of our obedience before all, so that we make sure we're walking according to the Spirit and serving him in spirit and in truth. Yeshua, we see his life, death, and resurrection equips us to shine his perfect light, given to us through the Torah that lights our path. In Yochanan 8, verse 12, Yeshua said, I am the light of the world. He who follows me shall by no means walk in darkness, but possess the light of life. And in Matthew 5, verse 14 to 16, he says, you are the light of the world. It is impossible for a city to be hidden on a mountain, nor do they light a lamp and put it under a basket, but on a lampstand, and it shines to all those in the house. Let your light shine before men, so that they see your good works and praise your Father who's in the heavens. So these words that we see that our Master was clearly speaking of him being the light of the world, coming to bring a separation from darkness, calling out of darkness into his marvelous light. We see a clear picture of separation coming forth, and now we have the choice to respond and the responsibility of accepting his separation, of us being in the chaos into the knowledge and wonder and revelation of who he is. Comes the responsibility for us to shine that knowledge, to shine that revelation by guarding the good works that's been prepared for us in advance, making sure that we are continually and consistently having oil in our lamps, guarding the commands, and doing our utmost to properly reflect his truth in every aspect of our daily lives. We as taught ones, Talmudim, disciples, whichever word you prefer to use, of Messiah are the light of the world, because we are branches of that light. So it's not a light that we produce of ourselves, but it's of him and his word in us that must be something that's evident in a dark world. We're not undercover agents, because then you're not shining the light. And it's a powerful thing when we realize what we've been given as a responsibility to shine continually. The Greek word that's used in Matthew 5, verse 14 for light is phos. It means light or fire, and it comes from phaos or theos, to shine or to manifest, especially by rays. So you get this picture of, when the sun beams its rays, you get the idea of that, of how we are to be beaming the light of the Master's presence. And the Greek word that's used in the Septuagint, phos or theos is also used in Shemot 27 verse 20, where the clear instruction was given to all the children of Israel to bring clear oil of pressed olives for the light to cause the lamp to burn continually. So you have lamp and light. One is the function and the other is the form. And so we understand that we are called to shine the light of our Master's presence. And the only way we do that is according to the form or the pattern as a body of Messiah walking in obedience to him. Because as we follow him, we won't be in darkness. We'll have the revelation knowledge and we'll be able to shine correctly. Now, there's a responsibility for all of us as children of Israel, being grafted into the nation of Israel by the blood of Messiah, to be bringing clear oil and allowing the lamp of his word to continually burn in us. This is a picture of walking according to the Spirit. And the Torah is spiritual, that Shaul reminds us of in Romans 7. And the reason for that is because it's the instructions that have clearly come from above, as opposed to man-made doctrines that are birthed in the earth that are of fleshly origin. And so we are not to be found to be like the foolish 5 maidens that had no oil in their lamps and were scurrying around trying to now get what they were supposed to already have, and it was too late. The command that's given in Shemot 27 verse 20 for all the children of Israel to bring the oil of pressed olives is also again repeated in Vayikra 24 verse 2, when it says we are to bring the oil of pressed olives for the light to make the lamp burn continually. So already in the Torah we've got this repetition of this command as a clear witness that it's not just told to us once, but it's given to us twice. Emphasis is placed on us making sure that we are walking according to the light. Now, when we understand the design, which we've been through in the book of Shemot, I'm not going to go into all the details in terms of the lamp and the oil and the fragrance and the spices, etc. But we do understand, as we're reminded of the design of the tabernacle in the set-apart place, which represents our gathering on a Sabbath and feast of our Master. The light is for those in the house, as I read earlier from our Master's words. And we understand that this is where we come together on his appointments and we have light shed on the word. It brings more understanding, revelation, knowledge to us. And the lampstand carries valuable lessons for us in understanding who we are in the Master, what we have as a privilege and gift every Shabbat, every feast in our Master's presence together, and the responsibility of taking that light to a dark world. Now, the menorah has a base and a shaft of 6 branches that are attached to the middle shaft, 3 on one side and 3 on the other. And there's 22 almond blossoms on the menorah, which also highlights for us a clear picture of the word of Elohim, 22 letters in the Hebrew alphabet from the Aleph to the Tav. And it highlights a wonderful picture for us that we are to be in the Master by guarding the word. When we start taking elements out of the word, we are no longer in the Master. Our Master said to us in Yochanan 15 that he is the vine and we are the branches, and that we are to stay in him so that we bear much fruit, fruit that lasts. And in fact, he also reminds us that he is the true vine, which highlights for us that there is a counterfeit vine, a degenerate vine. And a degenerate vine, while having been planted, a splendid vine, can become degenerate by not performing the function of shining the light, by disregarding the commands of our Master. And so we are to stay in him so that we can bear fruit. And we understand that at the top of each shaft of the 6 branches were bowls that held the oil that would light the wick so that it would burn and would be made to face forward so that the showbread table would have light on it. And so we know oil in Scripture is representative and symbolic of the Spirit of Elohim, the presence and the anointing and the equipping that we have in him as regard to do all that he commands. We cannot walk according to the Spirit without the Torah of the Master. And if we only walk according to the Torah by letter only without the witness of Yeshua Messiah, it's not according to the Spirit. So the Spirit, the Comforter, our Master's breath that he's given to us to remind us of how we are to be as people shining the light of his truth, can only be understood when we are ardent hearers of the word every Shabbat, listening to what Moshe is teaching us, as our Master has given us this clear pattern. And I once again reiterate, anybody who assumes to be able to change that pattern that our Master has set as a fixed order for every Shabbat is actually very presumptuous and arrogant and full of pride. Yet somehow presenting themselves as teachers of the Torah. Meanwhile, they don't even teach the Torah on a Shabbat. You know, we understand that when we look at the oil of pressed olives that was to be brought by all the children of Israel, we also see how it's when we are crushed that we allow the Spirit to use us, because the oil can only come out of the olives when it's crushed. And it's a process of this weight that's firstly crushed in the olive crusher, then put in the Gethsemane, the olive press, where over time this oil can come out and it can represent the clear and pure word of our Master. Now, the lampstand, as I said, was the only source of light in the set-apart place. Yahweh commanded Moshe that it must face toward the showbread table in Tehillah 119 as a celebration of coming back into obedience after exile in Babylon. I believe Ezra wrote Tehillah 119, and it's a celebration of the Torah. In 105, verse 105, he says, "Your word is a lamp to my feet and a light to my path." Without his Torah, we have no guidance. Now, the Torah of Yahweh encompasses all his word, from Bereshit to Chazon. Now, within that word, there's a reference to the Torah of Moshe. That's the first 5 books, which is the foundational base of instruction for set-apart living. The rest of the word enhances that in terms of what will the consequences be of obeying or not obeying, and also the call to return and the consequences of listening or not listening to that, and the revelation of Messiah that's brought forth in the witness of ones who actually walk in the light versus those who don't. So that's the complete Torah of our Master as an instruction of guarding us as a people that continually are shining the light because we walk in the light as he is in the light. And anyone who claims to be in Messiah yet doesn't guard the word and hates his brother, he's a liar and the truth is not in him. So the 7 menorah, or the 7 light menorah, so to speak, I just want to make it clear. Nowhere in Scripture is there ever a 9 light lampstand. There's no such thing in Yahweh's design for a set-apart people to have a menorah or a lampstand of 9 lights. And I'm mentioning that now because of the season that we're entering into, in terms of the corrupted presentation of man-driven commands that assume to present a dedication to Yahweh under the Hebrew word Chanukah, where we understand that word is used to describe dedication, and we see right through Scripture a lot of times where they rededicated. Each generation has the responsibility to dedicate themselves to the Master. Now, one can go through the book of Maccabees and clearly see there's no such thing as a 9 light menorah or a miraculous provision of oil that took place according to the traditions of man. It's nowhere in Maccabees. These are writings of sayings that are passed down in the traditions of man as a mystical teaching to veer people away from actually shining the true light of the word of our Master. So I'm mentioning this because the menorah of our Master is clearly given in its design to represent the complete nature of our Master's instructions for us for set-apart living, and it also highlights us as a complete bride. We see the number 7 is very clear in terms of completion, the full work in the 7 millennia that our Master is going to make complete when he comes again. We also see the 7 feasts, or the appointed times of our Master, representing the full function and redemptive work of our Master being made complete. We also understand in the book of Chazon, in the revelation of Yeshua Messiah, that we have the 7 assemblies that were in the region of Turkey, modern-day Turkey, but it's a clear witness and picture of prophecy for us of the body of Messiah and a returning call that's given to a scattered people to return to obedience. And so anybody that tries to present, especially over this season that's driven by man in terms of tolerance of corrupt worship, come out and be separate and disregard anything that tries to bring a unity of corrupt worship together as an acceptable practice, but rather, and one of the things that we learn from this Torah portion today is our need to be living set apart, separated lives unto the Master. That doesn't mean we divorce ourselves from our responsibility in a dark world in shining that light, because that is our responsibility. And being separated means not engaging or joining in or taking hands with in unity with corrupt worship practices. For that, Yahweh hates. And so when we understand the lampstand that Moshe was instructed to command Aharon to trim, Aharon never trimmed a 9-light menorah. And that's the point I want to make. Because when you do that, you've got to understand the ramifications behind this. And this is where people begin to add on to Yahweh's word, so they enforce other appointed times that are not Yahweh's appointed times. So I encourage you to go and read the article I did on Chanukah, Truth or Tradition, and just go through that and see that while we are not neglecting some of the things that Yahweh did historically through Scripture in bringing people back and restoring order, we must be on guard against adding to or taking away from the word of Yahweh. His appointed times are clearly instructed to us in Vayikra 23, and therefore we do not add to it or take away from it. And so I just wanted to highlight the importance of the lampstand, reminding us that we guard the Master's command and stay in the light of his word. And having said that, it's through the clear oil of pressed olives, so we don't take tainted oil. You know, the book of Kohelet tells us that dead flies in the ointment make it stink. And so therefore, when you think of flies and we think of Belial and worthlessness, and we understand that when you add worthless matters into the clear oil of our Master, it's no longer a fragrance to him, it's a stench to his nostrils. And so we understand a wonderful picture that we have in seeing how our Master as high priest came to do a work that would provide for us the necessary tools to equip us to shine the clear light of his truth and not be crippled with something that actually is abominable in his nostrils, but is rather pleasing as an acceptable offering of a daily living sacrifice before him. It was the duty, or part of the duty, of Aharon to trim the wicks, was to set them in order. And it was a requirement that the lamps were to continually burn. So as he's busy with one, there's always light going on. And it was his duty to make sure morning and night that this lampstand was continually burning. If you just left it, it would have gone out. You know? And so it also highlights, when we think of this idea of trimming the lamps, making sure it has oil, we also see the valuable pictures in our own lives as a body of Messiah and a high priest who, over his body as husband, is washing us as his bride through the washing of the word. We need to allow that word to trim us, so to speak, at times, lest we find ourselves getting stale because we think we don't need the word to shape us, to keep us burning bright. And we need the trimming of the word in our lives so that we make sure that no foreign matters are being seen, or that we run out of oil in many ways, you know. Our Master trims us through his word that equips us to shine. And if we don't allow his word to trim us, we lose our ability to be set in order. Now, there's a lot of disorder within a scattered people that claim to be the body of Messiah today, because they're not allowing the word to trim them. Because as soon as a trimming comes, they get offended, and they rather seek to have their ears tickled by myths and things that soothe them, and get comfortable with mixing. And when you mix, it's not clear anymore. So these are some of the challenging pictures that we must learn when we look into the mirror of the word. And the lampstand was made of the beaten work of gold, one work, and the skill that Yahweh gave Bezalel and Oholiab and all those that were appointed to make everything for the tabernacle in its service. You know, modern day skilled workmen have concluded that to make such a work of gold, pure gold, in one beaten work is almost impossible without the skill and wisdom of the Master that he gave his people. And this shows us that we are his workmanship, and it cannot be manipulated by man's ways. You know, and we're living in a time where we need to remind ourselves who is the author and perfecter of our belief, and be on guard against allowing other things to try and shape us, because then we're not one work in unity of the Master. And so the Hebrew word that's translated as beaten work is miksha. It means hammered work, and it's assumed to come from the root kasha, which means hard, severe, hard pressed, stiffened, or fierce. And what we can see in this, in being made as a beaten work, one work in Messiah, we recognize that, yes, it's not always easy. Sometimes it feels hard, but we must do our utmost to make sure that we're made into a community and a form of true unity that represents the spirit of our Master. Yeshua Messiah, the one thing that we see in our lives as a body of him, becoming one with him as head, came in the flesh of man and took our beating, and by his stripes we have been healed, so that the pressures that we face every single day, we recognize, as Shaul would say, as light and momentary troubles. Recognizing that, yes, as Shaul tells us in his letters to the Corinthian believers, the assembly, and to us today, that we may be hard-pressed, but we're not crushed. Yeshua Messiah was crushed for our iniquities, and therefore we must allow his word to beat us into shape so that we can be one with him. And that kind of beating is a good beating. If you, let's say, when you hear the word beat, you think, oh, but it was necessary for the lampstand to be beaten into one work to shape it perfectly. The lampstand was made according to the pattern that was shown to Moshe, and we see that, as I mentioned earlier, Messiah in the flesh of man came only to do that which he was instructed to do. He didn't take on, oh, well, I'm here now, let me see how I can do it my own way. Now, in verse 6, we see that they were told to be cleansed. When it says here, take the Levites from among the children of Israel, and you shall cleanse them. Now, the Hebrew word cleanse comes from the root word taher, which means to be clean, to purify, to be made clean, to be made bright and pure, to be physically sound, to be unadulterated, morally innocent. Don't know where's my accents going this morning, but it also carries the idea of purging or purifying or declaring something or someone clean. In other words, ceremonially clean, fit for service. And so we know that it's his word that equips us for service. And when you're not allowing that word to equip you for service, then you're not equipped for service. So any service that you are attempting to do is one that's not rendered as being acceptable. So the word taher is also used in Vayikra 16 verse 19, where the high priest would sprinkle the blood on the slaughter place and the sin of the sin offering on the horns of the slaughter place all around 7 times. This is a chapter that highlights the work of the high priest on the day of Yom Kippur, as we understand that when this was being done on Yom Kippur, no other service would be done in the tabernacle, highlighting a wonderful picture as to why there aren't slaughterings happening in any form in the earth right now until the millennial reign comes, because our Master is in the heavenly tabernacle interceding for us. Therefore, we understand that because we have such a high priest that is performing the service in the heavenly tabernacle, we have a responsibility to make sure that we are drawing near in perfection of set apartness and the clarity of his truth, without having the muddied chaos of corrupt, mixed, man-made things that actually cause the ointment to stink, rather than being the fragrance that our Master designs for us to have. In Hebrews 9, or Ivrim, it says in verse 11 to 14, Messiah, having become a high priest of the coming good matters through the greater and more perfect tent, not made with hands, that is, not of this creation, entered into the most set-apart place once for all, not with the blood of goats and calves, but with his own blood, having obtained everlasting redemption. For if the blood of bulls and goats and the ashes of a heifer, sprinkling the defiled, sets apart for the cleansing of the flesh, how much more shall the blood of Messiah, who through the everlasting Spirit offered himself unblemished to Elohim, cleanse your conscience from dead works to serve the living Elohim? What we're I'm mentioning this because here in this process of setting the Levites apart to make them ready for service, which was required so that the nation could have Yahweh's presence in their midst, we see here that if all that blood of bulls and goats and the cleansing that took place here brought about a service in the earthly tabernacle, how much more the blood of Messiah in the heavenly tabernacle actually cleanses our conscience from dead works, just going through the motions without the witness of Messiah. It actually causes us to realize that we can serve a living Elohim. And when we realize we're serving a living Elohim, we should be ready to throw off everything that should not be on our lives. It's through his one-time sacrifice for all that our Master made his bride clean, or gave the necessary tools for his bride to be made clean. And Aharon was told to cleanse the Levites, so we see that as high priest, as a shadow picture of the pattern, it was clear that that's why he was given this instruction, because it's a pattern of the coming good matters. Because it's only Yeshua Messiah, our high priest and king forever, that could cleanse us. You know, the blood of bulls and goats was a covering to make sure that the service in the tabernacle would continually function so that Yahweh's presence would not depart, which it did because they defiled. And so we understand that this word taher carries the insight for us as we understand the derivative of this word tahora means cleansing or purifying. And this is what his word does for us. We understand the power that we have as we see that our master calls us to be a people that are being cleansed by him through his word. Without his word, we have no cleansing. And Shaul reminds us in his second letter to the Corinthians that we have this treasure in earthen vessels so the excellence of the power might be of Elohim and not of us. So while we have a responsibility to cleanse our hands, cleanse our hearts, purify our hearts and minds, it's through the word that we are able to do this. And so we understand wonderful things that we are able to see by the work of our master, who is the potter and we're the clay, and he's cleansed us perfectly according to his word. And the laying on of hands that was required by all the nation on the Levites. Now, logistically, you wouldn't have 2 million plus people trying to lay hands on 8,000 plus Levites. It would be a pretty chaotic situation. But what we do see here, when we understand this principle of laying on of hands, it was normally done as a symbolic act of a transference of sin or a confession or the identification with another. In other words, having unity or part of one another. It's also symbolic of making a statement, for example, that when one was healthy, would go to one who was sick by laying hands on that sick one, is basically declaring, let this one be, according to the word of our master, as I am. It's a transference of that which one is in a state of perfection of set apartness to the other that's sick. And so we also understand that when we see this declaration of belief that's made, this is what can make the sick one well, as we see in the book of Yaakov and what he's describing here. We also see as in this Torah instruction that the nation of Israel were to lay hands on the Levites. So here in this transaction that was being done here, what we're seeing is as an acknowledgement of transferal of responsibility and service. That the Levites were now officially taking the place of the firstborn that our master bought as a redemption price for the firstborn that were put to death in Mitzrayim. And so we also see that, as I mentioned last week, and I repeat again, that the entire nation of Israel were servants to Yahweh. And within this nation of servants, there are those that all the servants acknowledge the ones that Yahweh has set apart to equip the nation to serve. That's the design of our master's body as pictured through the service of the Levitical priesthood in the pattern that was lived out until the coming good matters of our master. And so here's an acknowledgement of the service that the Levites and the high priest were being called to. The Levites and the priesthood within the Levites were being called to. And so while we are collectively, as a body of Messiah, a called out, chosen, set apart nation and a royal priesthood in Messiah, we need to recognize those who Yahweh has set apart for service, for which the rest of the body is responsible to support. The Levites and priests of today, in the order of Melchizedek, are those who Yahweh's called and appointed, as Shaul writes in Ephesians 4, to equip the body to be servants. And if people aren't submitting to the order, they can never be faithful and trustworthy servants and ambassadors of the reign. You know, there are a lot of people that are, in many ways today, operating in an office of ministry that man has called, and it's not necessarily been appointed by Yahweh. Shaul instructs Timotheus not to be hasty in the laying on of hands. What he was saying is, don't just be quick to just transfer that responsibility and authority, because whoever gets that responsibility and authority according to the master design is responsible for those that should be equipped to serve. And therefore they'll be judged doubly if you will. Do not lay hands on anyone hastily, nor share in sins of others. Keep yourself clean. He was warning Timotheus, because it's one thing when we get zealous for the master. It's just, oh, well, just go equip, just go equip. Oh, we've got to be careful, because if one is equipped prematurely or not at the appointment of our master, it can cause further damage rather than building up of the body of Messiah. The result of putting people in positions that are not appointed by the master can cause such a great stumbling block for so many people. And typically then you'll have people that are refusing to submit to the order and pattern of the word, refusing to hear the truth by holding fast to inherited lies, customs that seem nice, like, oh, we need a 9-lamp menorah, as an example that I've mentioned today. And so we see that most that claim to have been called by the master are sadly teaching the masses muddied waters, corrupted teachings, tickling the ears of hearers while poisoning them in the process. We are to be making sure the body is having the living water. And the only way the living water is given to the body so that the body can drink and be able to take that living water to very thirsty travelers in this world is by submitting to the correct order and humbling themselves in walking according to the clear instructions as given through Yahweh to Moshe, to a nation that was to serve him. And so here, Israel acknowledged the fact that the Levites had been called and set apart by Yahweh by laying their hands on them. In other words, hands speak of what one does. So the nation was basically saying, we understand and acknowledge Yahweh has taken the Levites instead of the firstborn, because the firstborn was a transaction that was taking place, that he killed the firstborn of everyone that did not have the blood of the lamb on their doorposts. And so Yahweh did that transaction by blood, which is a clear shadow picture of our master's blood, bringing a transaction that takes place in the order of Melchizedek. And with the rest of the nation laying hands, they're acknowledging that these guys are the ones that are going to keep the pattern and service right, equipping us how to maintain or retain Yahweh's presence in our midst. The same is today. The same pattern is today in terms of our service in our high priest and king. Many people actually are not acknowledging the appointed ones of our master today, because as I mentioned a couple of weeks ago, with technology advancing, everybody is an influencer. Not everybody, but a lot of people think they are. And in that, they think they're the ones that can equip the body. Meanwhile, they're causing more damage, because what happens is that a lot of mixing and muddied waters gets in there. And those that they are claiming to equip, and in that, there's no proper submission. So everyone's doing what's right in their own eyes and claiming, no, well, I can do this, I can do that. And it's a very dangerous thing to be in, because you are risking the presence of Yahweh from being in one's midst. And that's what it's all about, is to have Yahweh's presence. That's what everything is about, from the first sin that caused mankind to be separated from Yahweh to now be brought back into his presence, where he will always be with those that have guarded his word and have overcome. So the Levites were accepted by the rest of the nation, as these are the ones that are going to perform the service and protect Yahweh's presence in us, so we do what they tell us to do. It's important to understand, because if we don't, what happened over time is the priesthood got corrupted. Why? Well, because people weren't obeying and weren't listening to the instructions of the priesthood. So the priesthood typically would then resort to doing what the people wanted to do. And this was a corrupted service that got a separation within the body into two houses, and got one house divorced and scattered, and got another house sent into captivity after many were destroyed by judgment of Yahweh. Having come back, a restoration of that priesthood took place, and a restoration of service, which again over time got corrupted again. And that's why Messiah in the flesh had to come and for once and for all establish a pattern that can never be corrupted. And anyone that deviates from this will be cast out, as witnessed through what happens when you don't obey and you don't submit to the proper order. Because it's all about order. Levitical order is just a pattern picture of the order of Melchizedek. And so we understand this acknowledgement is one that has to happen today, where anybody coming into the body must acknowledge and accept those the master has called to equip them for service, to be servants. And therefore, when you say, I don't need to, I don't want to, you're a rebellious person, child, that is at risk of being cast out for rebellion, which we're going to start looking a lot at over the next couple of weeks, including today, Now, the wave offering, when Aharon now, once the children of Israel had laid their hands, in other words, acknowledged these are the ones Yahweh's put according to his pattern to do the service, he was to wave the Levites before Yahweh as a wave offering from the children of Israel. The wave offering is something that should be quite important in our understanding of the appointed times of our Master, as what work he's done in us to present us as an acceptable body that is able to serve him. And the wave offering tenufa means a swinging or wave offering, coming from the word nuf, which means to move to and fro, to wave, to sprinkle. And it carries actually a better understanding in this broader picture of waving 8,000 plus Levites as presenting, to present. So what Aharon was to do is he was to wave the Levites. Therefore, the Levites were being presented to Yahweh by the high priest. The logistics behind this, again, some might try and figure out in their minds. I don't believe that Aharon was picking up every single one of 8,000 people, and wave you here. Again, it's about with lifted hands and acknowledgement of the nation saying, yes, we acknowledge their service. Aharon now then says, yes, here they are to serve. That's the process. And we understand this is what Shavuot reminds us of. When the tenufa, the wave offering, is brought of the 2 loaves of bread. And it's one that's done as acceptance before the Master, having had the good kingdom leaven worked in it, presented as a clear witness of a bride that is made ready to serve. And the outpouring of the Spirit that would come there as a helper to help a body serve in perfection and truth. Yeshua Messiah, in him, we are presented as a servant nation that within that nation has a priesthood that equips the servant nation to keep serving the way they should. Does that make sense? And so when we understand the wave offering, a wave offering, even when we bring a wave offering to the Master, it's symbolic of the work of our hands that we are presenting to Yahweh as that which is being released to him, as an acceptance of his work in one's life and the submission of authority that one has to working the work of him who's called us out of darkness into his marvelous light. And it pictures, the wave offering pictures giving it fully to Yahweh. It carries wonderful significance in our lives when we, in our Master, are lifted up as a wave offering that's acceptable to him, because now we're given wholeheartedly over to servanthood. Maybe the better way to understand it, because people get their lines crossed when we say, well, are we priests? Are we not priests? We're all servants. And within the servanthood, we all serve, but there's a service of the priesthood that equips the servants to serve. So when we are handed over by our high priest, we are all now in service of our Master. We belong to him. We've been bought at a price. We're no longer our own. He's lifted us up from the miry clay, from the confusion, from Sheol, from death, so that we can have everlasting life and serve him correctly according to his design. We understand that as a people who have confessed our commitment to our Master, we've entered into a marriage covenant by saying, I do, when we pass through the waters individually. Now collectively being brought together, we understand in the Master, he's the one that lifts us up. And in him lifting us up, we must be on guard against being resistant to our responsibilities. This is where giftings and talents and callings and appointments must be clearly identified, for each part must do its work. So we understand this wonderful picture that we've been given here. There's a process here. They get cleansed. They're told to get cleaned up, and this cleansing happens when we pass through the waters, we understand. Then there's an acknowledgement who are the ones appointed. These appointed ones are lifted up so that the rest of the nation can have the assurance that we will retain Yahweh's presence. And here we see in verse 14, when it says to us here, thus you shall separate the Levites from among the children of Israel, and the Levites shall be mine. This in itself teaches us valuable lessons on the clear principle of separation, where we are called to come out and be clean, touch not the unclean, be separate, and Yahweh will receive us. It was through these instructions that given by Yahweh to Moshe, or through Moshe to Aharon, to Moshe and then to Aharon, that the Levites were separated unto Yahweh. Yeshua Messiah fulfilled all the requirements of the Torah for us to be in him as a body, to be completely separated as servants instead of partners. The Hebrew word for separate is badal, and it means to be divided, to sever, to separate, to come over, to make a distinction. It's important to understand that if you need to live separated lives, you have to be able to make a distinction what you should be doing and what you shouldn't be doing. We are, or when we are separated from the world, that's when we begin to make, or should begin to make, a clear distinction between that which is of the world and that which is of Elohim. And our lives should clearly shine that distinction. Although we are in the world, our master said we are not of the world. And he prayed that we would not be taken out of the world, because we have a duty to shine the light in a very dark world. And we are to sever those things of darkness in our lives, because it has no place where the light of the truth should be dwelling. The first time that the root badal is used in Scripture is in Bereshit 1 verse 4, when it says Elohim saw the light that it was good, and Elohim separated the light from the darkness. The first act of separation that Yahweh did in this creation time of 7 millennia was to separate light from darkness. And isn't that what the whole redemption is about? In 1 Peter 2 verse 9, he says, you are a chosen race, a royal priesthood, a set-apart nation, a people for a possession. This is bridal language, because we go to Shemot 19 and we remind Yahweh giving a conditional clause. If you obey my commands, you guard my Torah, then you will be a treasured possession, a set-apart nation, a royal priesthood. So it's conditional. So when Kepha is reminding us of these words, it's reminding us of being a bride that's been purchased at a price, that said yes to our husband and Redeemer, and guarding the commands, because that's when we will be identified as this. And it says, we are identified as this. He goes on, he says, that you should proclaim the praises of him who called you out of darkness into his marvelous light. In other words, the one who separated you from dark matters. Yahweh declared the end from the beginning. He separated light from darkness. We've been called out of darkness, and we are to be living as children of light. Shaul writes in Ephesians 5 verse 8, you were once darkness, but now are light in the Master. Walk as children of light. Learning to walk as children of light, we see the need to be able to distinguish and separate light from darkness. Because if you don't, you get gray areas. And then if you're in the gray area, you're not in a good place, because then it will be do whatever you want. Vayikra 10 verse 10 says that make a distinction between the set apart and the profane, and between the unclean and the clean. We understand in Vayikra 11 with the dietary laws as well, is to make a distinction between the unclean and the clean, between the living creature that is eaten and the living creature that is not eaten. In other words, what was being instructed there in Vayikra on both occasions was that the Levites were to instruct the people so that they learn to distinguish between what is clean and what is unclean. But if you are learning from people that aren't appointed, how do you know that you are actually learning how to distinguish between clean and unclean? You know, Yahweh separated us from all peoples to be a set-apart nation of servants unto him. And we are called to make a clear distinction between what is clean and what is not. Shaul writes, again, therefore, as I mentioned earlier in 2 Corinthians 6, verse 17, come out from among them and be separate, says Yahweh. Do not touch what is unclean, and I will receive you. There's a clear thing. Yahweh will receive us, but there's responsibility on our part. He doesn't just receive you how you want to be received. I mean, it's a gift of him, providing that ability to be received by him. But there's a responsibility on our part to come out, be separate, touch not, do not engage in unclean matters. When you say you've come out, but yet you continue to mix, then you are still holding on to unclean things. And the Greek word that's used in 2 Corinthians 6, verse 17 for separate is aphorizo, which means to mark off by boundaries, or to ostracize, or to separate, or to set apart. Now, I like the word ostracize in terms of the Greek understanding, because I think the urgency for people to understand separation is not quite there for many people. Because when you think of something being ostracized, it's cut off. So yes, some people might cut you off for walking in the light, but that's okay, because their ways should be cut off to you too. Now, aphorizo comes from apo, which is a primary preposition, which means from or away from or against, and horizon or horizon, which means predetermined, fixed, appointed, mark off by boundaries. So you're basically seeing that the call to come out and be separate is that we must not be found to be among the ways of the nations, because when our master comes to separate the wicked, the Donnell, out, he's coming to remove that which has not been separated unto him in works of set apartness. Now, there's one word that I wanted to show, might show a couple of words today, but here's one, separation, because it's all about living set-apart lives. Badal is pictured as such in the Hebrew ancient pictographic. You've got a beit, a dalet, and a lamet. The beit represents the tent floor plan, the house, the design, and more importantly, as living stones, who we are as the house of Messiah. The dalet is a tent door. It represents our entrance, our exit. Our master is the door of the sheep. He's also the good shepherd, as pictured by the lamet, the shepherd's rod, which represents authority and what one submits to. So when we understand this, we need to make sure that we know what it means to be living separated lives. And when we look at this pictographic, it's clear: house, door, authority. So we are the dwelling place of Elohim. We come to the door of appointment by guarding the Sabbaths, by guarding the appointed times of our master. And we submit to the house rules, the authority of the good shepherd, who teaches us to distinguish between the set apart and the profane. And he's appointed the Levites and the priesthood to teach the difference between the set apart and the profane. Neglecting his Sabbaths and appointed times of the master will render one as being common and filthy, unable to make a clear distinction, and teaches us how vital it is to perfect set apartness continually and pursue set apartness on a daily basis. We are not to profane the master's appointed times, because that will cause one to be cut off. We also understand how serious it is to continually separate ourselves from things that actually have no part in a function of a bride and body of Messiah. We are to be committed to not touching that which is unclean. And again, touching is about engaging and doing, as the hand speaks of what we do. We are to be confidently committed to walking in obedience, because that's when we actually are assured that we are walking in the light and are separated from darkness. We are to be given wholeheartedly over to the master. And we see the picture of the Levites that were given for service. And here we are told that they were given to Aharon, the high priest. So Aharon now, having waved them, the instruction is, these are given to you. The headship of the high priest is established as a picture of the coming good matters of how we are to be submitted to our high priest and king forever in the order of Melchizedek. And when we look at these ones that are given to him, the Hebrew word that's used here for the given ones is the nethanim, coming from the word nathan, which is to give, to put, to set, to be appointed, to be placed. And we understand that this is a clear shadow picture of us. When we are his body, that means we've been given to him. That means we submit to him. And within him, we have a functioning role. Now, the Levites, again, it was being clearly identified here, Yahweh making it clear the Levites were taken instead of the firstborn. We also see that they were given as a gift to the high priest and to his sons for the service of the children of Israel. Now, as ones who have been called out of darkness, having acknowledged that we have a high priest and a redeemer who has given his life for us to be cleansed, when we pass through the waters, we die to self and we're raised in the resurrection power of our master, given over to him for the gift of service of the body. We have a responsibility to be serving according to that which we've been given to him as a gift, but yet we can only operate in that when we receive the gift of the set-apart Spirit and obey his word. Ephesians 4, as I mentioned, speaks about certain gifts to serve and mature the body. Corinthians 12 speaks of the various gifts that are appointed by the one master to the body in order to serve him and to build up the body as we serve our high priest, having been cleansed and set apart and given wholeheartedly to him through his blood. And so this reminds us, when we look through this, it's not like, oh, yeah, geez, all those Levites. We have to understand that while there are literal things that were happening, and we're not going to equate everything and try and over-spiritualize things, we look at this pattern, we learn from it to understand who we are and the responsibility we have in being servants of the Most High. You see, with the Levites being separated, didn't make the responsibility for the rest of the nation to live set-apart lives. We must understand, because I think a lot of times people tend to think it's only for the pastor, or it's only, the traditional ways. No, it's only for them. No, there are those that are equipped to equip everybody to all be living set-apart lives. And one of the things that we learn through this week and the weeks to come is about those that aren't living set-apart lives and the danger it can cause to the entire nation and the wrath of Yahweh that's coming upon those that aren't actually living set-apart lives. We need to realize that not all priests were Levites, but all the priests were Levites, but not all the Levites were priests. A shadow picture here of the given ones highlights that we have been given to the Master. Now, when our Master was praying to the Father as a means of instructing us, when he was in the role of a son in the flesh of man, he expressed that all were given to him. In Yochanan 17, he says, when I was with them in the world, I was guarding them in your name, which you have given me. And I watched over them, and not one of them perished except the son of destruction, that scripture might be fulfilled. So as a type and a role of time, the Father gave Yeshua Messiah all of us in order for us as a body to serve. The entire nation of Israel, as I said, are called servants of Yahweh. And when Yeshua was arrested, those who came to arrest him fell backwards at his words when he declared that he was the I am. In Yochanan 18, verse 8 to 9, Yeshua answered, I said to you that I am. If then you seek me, allow these to go, in order that the word might be filled which he spoke. Of those whom you have given me, I have lost none. So here's a wonderful picture. Remember when he saw Nathanael? When he came to Nathanael and Nathanael was like, how do you know me? He said, well, I saw you when you were sitting under the fig tree. And he made this wonderful statement. You are the son of the living Elohim, because it was a clear witness that here is the I am standing before a given one. It was a picture again of the true ones that are given for service to the Master know who he is. The Levites cleansed themselves and washed their garments. Very important. The word for and cleanse themselves is vayit chatu, which comes from the verb chata, which means to miss the mark, to do wrong, to incur guilt, to fail to reach. It's often used to refer to sin, but it also means to be cleansed or purified or purifying oneself. And the idea here, it's written in a reflexive action tense, which means to purify oneself from uncleanness. So here it's not missing the mark, it's actually cleansing oneself from having missed the mark. And the Levites cleansed themselves from all that was wrong, picturing for us a clear lesson of putting off the falsehood and the defilement of the flesh in order to truly walk in set-apartness and truth of the word. If you don't take off or put off those things that can corrupt you while you're trying to put on that which should set you apart, it will never be completely set apart. It will be garments that have blemishes in them and unacceptable before the Master. The Hebrew word that's translated as wash, when the Levites washed themselves, comes from the word kavas, which is a washing by treading. We've mentioned a number of times in the service of the tabernacle the two different kinds of washings that are referred to in the Torah. This is the one kavas, which speaks about a complete treading of washing underfoot in the water, and that represents to us our immersion, that initial washing that we get. The other one is rachatz, which is what's done when the priests would wash their hands from the water that was taken from the bronze laver, in hands and feet, in order to be cleaned for service in the set-apart place. So we allow his word to wash our walk and our works each and every day after having received a washing by treading, in a sense, at our immersion in the Master. Kavas is also used in calling a backsliding people to wash their hearts, because when you've backslidden, some people say, but if I was immersed, do I need to get immersed again? Well, you know what? If you've backslidden to the point where you aren't obeying, then yes, you need to surrender and die to self again. You need that immersion again. Yirmiyahu 4 verse 14 says, O Yerushalayim, wash your heart from evil and be saved. Till when would your wicked thoughts remain in you? Wash your heart. What was supposed to be on the heart? The Torah. And when you deviate from the Torah, the proper hearing of the Torah and the doing of the Torah, then you allow other wicked things to get into your heart. The heart becomes deceitful above all. And this is where he's saying, wash your heart. This washing that's called for here is to be completely washed from corruption and missing the mark, to get one positioned into a place where your aim is restored, so to speak. Because when you miss the mark, you've taken your eyes off the Master, and you've walked according to the ways of anything else other than the way of the Master. And so we understand that this washing that's required is a requirement to make one fit for service in the body of Messiah. And if one does not get immersed in the name of Yeshua Messiah, you can't be part of the body. Because when you're not immersed in his name, to get that washing away of all the rubbish that has made one guilty before the Master, then you can't partake in the Passover meal. And if you can't partake in the Passover meal, you have no part in the Master. It's a heart thing. Even when Israel entered into a marriage covenant at the mountain, when Moshe came down from the mountain to the people to set them apart, they washed their garments. He commanded them to wash. They had 3 days to get ready. So they took the responsibility of following the instructions to come before the presence of the Master the way he commands it to be. It's all about a heart. And when one hardens their heart, this picture of hardening one's heart is being resistant to the Torah instructions. And when one hardens their heart, they fall into dysfunctional ways. Mishle 28 verse 14 says, blessed is the man who always fears Elohim, but he who hardens his heart falls into evil. In other words, this falling into evil is when you harden your heart and you're resistant to being obedient. It's a sign that the Torah is not really the functional living word in you that's giving you direction and guidance. You you stray, you go into dysfunctional ways and you miss the mark. A hardened heart is a picture of stubbornness, refusing to submit to walking in obedience to the Torah that leads to life. And in Mishle 10 verse 8, it says, the wise in heart accept commands, but one with foolish lips falls. So here you have a couple of pictures. The fools fall because what's on their lips? The word, the Torah, is to be in our hearts and our mouths to do it. But one with foolish lips might be one that can recite the Torah, but aren't doing the Torah, showing themselves to be ones that honor the Master with their lips, but their hearts are far from him. And therefore, they are not fearing the Elohim. They are that has called us out of darkness. They are not fearing him and guarding his commands. In a cry of repentance, when David cried out in Tehillah 51, he says, create in me a clean heart, O Elohim, and renew a steadfast spirit within me. Our Master made it clear when he said, blessed are the clean in heart, because they shall see Elohim. Because when your heart gets defiled because of stubbornness and pride and resistance to obedience, you will not see Elohim in the sense of be accepted by him, because every eye will confess. So everybody's going to see him. Every tongue will confess, every eye will see him, and every tongue will confess and acknowledge that he is Yahweh our Savior, that Yeshua Messiah is Yahweh our Savior. But not seeing Elohim is a clear metaphor of not being accepted by him as the apple of his eye, but rather being rejected by him because he's turned away his acceptance from you and poured out his wrath. Why? Because those that don't obey him have turned their eyes away from him and looking to dysfunctional ways. And I'm highlighting these verses to highlight the idea of cleansing the hearts, to show how important it is that we can see the lessons that are contained in this Torah portion of the Levites who had cleansed themselves and washed their garments, picturing for us a people who were zealous and ardent to be ready for set-apart service, and making it an intentional action of making sure that they were ready to serve. And it teaches us that we are to be ardent for good works. The opposite of being ardent for good works that Shaul reminds us in Ephesians and Romans is being lazy. Shlomo gives us many parables of the lazy one. The Hebrew word for garments comes from the word beged, which means garment covering. It can also mean treachery or to deceive, because it has this twofold meaning. Because if you've got garments of righteousness and you're allowing your good works to be seen by all, you've got nothing to hide, but you're in the covering of what we've been given while we are still in this corruptible flesh. It can also highlight garments of deceit, where putting on a show like the religious Pharisees, but clearly inside is death, no life of the Torah. They can have the words of the Torah being prescribed, but the witness of Messiah is missing. It is a word that's used to describe garments both of rich and poor, from the mighty rich ones to the rags of the poor and the leper. Having been cleansed by our Master through immersion in his name, we've been given garments of righteousness. He's clothed us from on high. And now the responsibility that we have is to keep those garments clean. Chazon 3 verse 4, to the assembly in Sardis, he says, there are a few names in Sardis who have not defiled their garments. They shall walk with me in white, because they are worthy. They're ones who have not defiled their garments are the ones who are worthy of walking with the Master in the renewal. Firstly, in the millennial reign and in the renewal, to be with him forever. He says in Chazon 3 verse 18, I advise you to buy from me gold refined in the fire, so that you become rich, and white garments, so that you become dressed, so that the shame of your nakedness might not be shown, and you anoint your eyes with ointment, so you shall not see. Now this was written to those in Laodicea. Not Laodicea, in anoint your eyes with ointment so that you see. So that you shall see. Now, this was written, let me just get to the right assembly, so I'm not speaking out of turn. 3 verse 18 is to Laodicea. I was right. Okay. Now, Laodicea is the lukewarm assembly, and we have to understand the words of our Master. I mentioned it before, but just want to bring to remembrance, to bring life to the word, so that we understand the clear witness of what was being spoken through the revelation that was given to Yochanan, is that in Laodicea, it was a very flourishing town or city that thought they had it all sorted. You know, they once were destroyed by an earthquake and fire and enemies that had come to destroy their city, but they rebuilt it themselves. They didn't require others to assist them financially. They had wool, known as the black sheep of Laodicea, that were a highly sought after wool that was paid, nations paid a very high price for. They had an eye university that from the products of the soil in that region, they made certain salve medicine for the eye that would fix ailments. So they thought they had it all sorted. They didn't need anybody's help. They rich. They helping people to physically see. And here our Master rebukes them. And he says, I advise you to buy gold from me refined in the fire. Don't think that you can take the wealth of the nations. It's going to be nothing for you in the day of the wrath of Elohim. Become rich in the Master, not in the flesh of man. White garments. They had the black wool of Laodicea. Here he's saying you need to have garments that he gives that are pure and represent the righteousnesses of the set apart ones, so that you become properly dressed and the shame of your nakedness is not seen, and anoint your eyes with ointment, the proper ointment of our Master's sacrifice and redeeming work by his Spirit, not according to the flesh of man. In Chazon 16 verse 15, he says, I am coming as a thief. Blessed is he who is staying awake and guarding his garments, lest they walk naked and they see his shame. We are to be guarding the word. One of the things that we also take note in the Torah when we go through the Torah of cleansing of leprosy is that we see the one who was being cleansed had a responsibility. He had to destroy his garments, because it's a clear picture of you have to acknowledge that you need this which is defiled, you have to physically destroy. And this is this theme that we see right through the renewed writings of this responsibility of putting off and putting on, putting off and putting on. I'll give a few verses. Romans 13 verse 12 to 14. The night is far advanced, the day is come near, so let us put off the works of darkness and let us put on the armor of light. Let us walk becomingly as in the day, not in wild parties and in drunkenness, not in living together and in decencies, not in fighting and envy, but put on the Master Yeshua Messiah and make no provision for the lust of the flesh. This Greek word put off is apotithemi, which means to lay aside, to cast off, to lay down. And Yaakov uses this word, or it's used in the letter of Yaakov, chapter 1, verse 21 to 22, and it says, therefore put away, that's that word for put off, put away all filthiness and overflow of evil, and receive with meekness the implanted word, which is able to save your lives, and become doers of the word and not hearers only, deceiving yourselves. Here is a wonderful text which says, if you don't do the word, you won't get saved. Because you need to receive with meekness, humble yourselves. Don't get arrogant and say, I don't need to obey the Torah. With meekness, humble yourselves, receive the implanted word. It's a heart thing. Let his Torah be written on your heart, not just as something that's stored away, that it's in your heart and in your mouths to do it, because that's when it will save you as you work out your deliverance. So yes, it is a salvation issue when we obey or don't obey. You don't get saved to just do whatever you want. You get saved by his grace because you weren't obeying, but by grace, he offers deliverance to you. And he offers this gift of salvation. And when you say yes to that and get washed, you now have a responsibility to obey in order for that deliverance or salvation to be completed, because we are not yet a work completed. But that work which he has begun in us, he will complete as long as you stay in him. We have a responsibility to be doers of the word. And being doers of the word comes with the responsibility of putting off and putting on. Galatians 3 verse 27 says, for as many of you as were immersed into Messiah have put on Messiah. Ephesians 4 verse 21 to 24 says, if indeed you have heard him and were taught by him, as truth is in Yeshua, that you put off with regard to your former way of life, the old man, being corrupted according to the desires of the deceit, and to be renewed in the spirit of your mind, and that you put on the renewed man, which was created according to Elohim, in righteousness and in set apartness of the truth. Colossians 3 verse 8 to 10 says, but now also put off all these, displeasure, wrath, evil, blasphemy, filthy talk from your mouth. Do not lie to each other, since you have put off the old man with his practices, and have put on the new one, who is renewed in the knowledge according to the likeness of him who created him. You know, many people read, there's a lot of things that Shaul highlights here, but how often people just read over things. Let's just take one example, filthy talk from your mouth. Have you truly put that off? Because if you haven't put off, you can't actually put on the garments of righteousness correctly. You see, if you put on the armor of light, but there's still some darkness in you, you cripple the light from shining the way it should. The Levites, having cleansed themselves, washed their garments, it's a shadow picture of what we've been commanded to do in our Master. When we do this correctly, and as I read from Galatians, this is when we put on Messiah, our immersion in him. So yes, it's critical that we acknowledge we get immersed in his true name, as not just immersion of repentance that Yochanan came to proclaim, because many claim, but I was immersed in the wrong name. No, that was an immersion unto repentance. When those that hadn't heard that there was a spirit, they were commanded, even though they had Yochanan's immersion, to still get immersed in the name of Yeshua Messiah. You can read about that in the book of Acts. So, having cleansed themselves, washed their garments, Aharon could make atonement for them. And this is where we see the work of our Master in us. If we're not coming in and confessing that we need a Savior and are dying to self and passing through the waters, putting off, severing all junk out of our lives, making a distinction, if we're not doing that, we cannot properly put on the Messiah. Then our immersion is not done truthfully. Now, having been immersed and getting new garments on, how do I operate in these garments? That's where you go every week, where Moshe is read, and you learn how to keep your garments clean. The problem is many people are defiling their garments because they've stopped learning how to keep them clean. It's a heart thing. And we need to realize the atonement that we've been given in our Master to be a people that can be cleansed, that can be set apart. So this opening of this Torah portion today is about the gift of separation that our Master has presented to us, as he himself was separated from his position in the heavens to take on the form of the corruptible flesh, but know no corruption, and become sin for us, and in his resurrection provide for us the gift of redemption that comes at a price. We need to die to self. We need to get a proper washing. We need to receive with meekness the implanted word and clothe ourselves in him and guard those garments. But then we can be assured that our obedience will save us. Any thoughts on this? Or who wants to read chapter 9? Jackie. So we get there. Can't see my mouse. There we go.
And Yahweh spoke to Moshe in the wilderness of Sinai in the first new moon of the second year after they had come out of the land of Mitzrayim, saying, Now let the children of Israel perform the Pesach at its appointed time. On the 14th day of this new moon, between the evenings, perform it at its appointed time. According to all its laws and right rulings, you perform it. And Moshe spoke to the children of Israel to perform the Pesach. So they performed the Pesach on the 14th day of the first new moon, between the evenings, in the wilderness of Sinai. According to all that Yahweh commanded Moshe, so the children of Israel did. But there were men who were defiled for a being of a man, so that they were not able to perform the Pesach on that day. So they came before Moshe and Aharon that day, and those men said to him, We are defiled for the being of a man. Why are we withheld from bringing near the offering of Yahweh at its appointed time among the children of Israel? And Moshe said to them, Wait, let me hear what Yahweh commands concerning you. And Yahweh spoke to Moshe, saying, Speak to the children of Israel, saying, When any male of you or your generations is unclean for a being, or is far away on a journey, ye shall still perform the Pesach to Yahweh. On the 14th day of the second new moon between the evenings, they perform it. With unleavened bread and bitter herbs they eat it. They do not leave off it until morning, and they do not break a bone of it. According to all the laws of the Pesach, they perform it. But the man who is clean and is not on a journey and has failed to perform the Pesach, that same being shall be cut off from among his people, because he did not bring the offering of Yahweh at its appointed time. That man bears his sin. And when a stranger sojourns among you, then he shall perform the Pesach of Yahweh. He shall do so according to the law of the Pesach and according to its right ruling. You have one law, both for the stranger and the native of the land. And on the day that the dwelling place was raised up, the cloud covered the dwelling place, the tent of the witness. From evening until morning it was above the dwelling place like the appearance of fire. Thus it was continually. The cloud covered it by day, and the appearance of fire by night. And whenever the cloud was taken up from above the tent, after that the children of Israel would depart. And in the place where the cloud dwelt, there the children of Israel would camp. At the mouth of Yahweh the children of Israel departed, and at the command of Yahweh they camped. They remained camped as long as the cloud dwelt above the dwelling place. Even when the cloud lingered many days above the dwelling place, the children of Israel guarded the charge of Yahweh and did not depart. And so it was, when the cloud was above the dwelling place a few days, according to the mouth of Yahweh they camped, and according to the mouth of Yahweh they would depart. And so it was, when the cloud dwelt only from evening until morning. When the cloud was taken up in the morning, then they departed. Whether by day or by night, whenever the cloud was taken up, they departed. whether 2 days or a new moon or a year, that the cloud lingered above the dwelling place to dwell upon it, the children of Israel camped and did not depart. But when it was taken up, they departed. At the mouth of Yahweh they camped, and at the mouth of Yahweh they departed. They guarded the charge of Yahweh at the mouth of Yahweh by the hand of Moshe.
Okay, so I love the progression of this Torah portion teaching us valuable lessons, because we've seen the Levites being separated, being washed or cleansing themselves, given for service, given instructions on guarding this. We learn valuable lessons in who we are in the Master, having received an immersion that gives us access into his body. And what that immersion does is it gives us access to become part of the body through the keeping of the Pesach. So we see this next instruction in regards to the command regarding Pesach and guarding the service to perform the Pesach. And so we clearly see that the Pesach meal is done. The Passover is on the 14th. And from evening to evening, you observe your Passover. And we know that it was on the 14th day that the Passover lamb was slain. And so from sunset of the 13th all the way through to sunset of the 14th is the Passover, the preparation for Matzot. We eat the Passover meal that begins the Feast of Matzot. So we don't eat the Passover meal at the start of the 14th day. That is when our Master had a meal with his taught ones as an instructional meal, highlighting to them a new ordinance that he would give in him being the Passover lamb, that they would have as a cup of remembrance and break bread as a remembrance of his body every year when they would keep the Passover meal. And the Passover meal is done to start Matzot on the 15th of the first new moon. And we're going to get more into that the closer that we get to Pesach in a couple of months' time or a few months' time. And what we see here is that in these instructions, the first half of this chapter is about the Pesach and the performing of the Pesach, and then it's about the cloud. So we have this wonderful thing: cleansed, set apart for service, becoming part of the body, and retaining Yahweh's presence, going where his cloud goes. You know, we can see wonderful lessons in recognizing people who aren't where Yahweh's cloud is are clearly disobedient and not guarding their garments. Whereas the clear instruction here is, when Yahweh's cloud moves, you move. When it stays, you stay. So when we look at this, the laws of the Pesach are very clearly given to us in Shemot 12. And the law of the Pesach is that all males had to be circumcised in the foreskin of their flesh in order to eat the Passover. And any stranger that was sojourning among you, if he wanted to eat the Passover, he had to be circumcised. And so the debate comes along about physical circumcision today. And that is the major focus on most of Shaul's letters in the renewed writings, especially to the Galatians and the Colossians, because those Yehudim who were resisting Shaul's work of bringing the good news to the nations and calling Ephraim out of the nations, a covenanted people, or to become part of a covenant that which was cut off from, they were trying to destroy his work and say he's not keeping the Torah of Moshe, etc. We looked last week at an example in Acts where he went and paid the fees of those that had been separated in the Nazarite vow. So Shaul is not doing away with the law of the Passover by saying, if you get physically circumcised, Messiah is of no value to you. And if you get physically circumcised, you might as well cut everything off because you've denied Messiah. He's not doing away with this command of the law of the Pesach for circumcision. He's helping us understand how important it is for all of us to be immersed in the name of Yeshua Messiah so that we fulfill the law of the Passover. You see, when you eat the Passover without having been immersed in the name of Yeshua Messiah, you are bringing judgment upon yourself because you actually have no right to partake in that table. There's no male or female, slave or free, Greek or Yehudi. That's what Shaul was saying in terms of entrance into covenant. The circumcision of the foreskin of a male child at 8 days old was a sign given of the covenant as to the seed. So from Abraham's child, Yitzchak, who was circumcised at 8 days old, just so by the way that Ishmael was also circumcised at 13 years old, so that he could also partake in Yahweh's presence. But the sign of the covenant that Yahweh would be to a covenanted people was from a child 8 days old to the seed. The seed is Messiah. When Messiah came in the flesh of man, he was circumcised on the Shemini Atzeret, the last great day of the Feast of Sukkot. And in doing so, fulfills the sign of the covenant, that this is the one who causes us to be grafted back into covenant, which he declared to Abraham when he passed through the sacrifice by a pillar of fire, accepting the sacrifice that had been prepared. So circumcision is not done away with in terms of the law of the Passover. It is now understood in the body of Messiah how we receive this circumcision, not done by the hands of men, but that which is from above. And that is through our immersion in the name of Yeshua Messiah. And the circumcision of our heart is one that was always the design of Yahweh. The physical circumcision was the sign of a covenanted people until Messiah would come and be that high priest, which causes us to enter in, not just the blood of bulls and goats. Colossians 2, Shaul writes in verse 11 to 12, in him you were also circumcised with a circumcision not made with hands, in the putting off of the body of sins of the flesh by the circumcision of Messiah, having been buried with him in immersion, in which you also were raised with him through the belief in the working of Elohim, who raised him from the dead. What Shaul is reminding the believers at Colossae here and us today is that we've received his circumcision. And in our immersion in him gives us his circumcision from above, not by the hands of men. Because what Shaul was warning, when you start operating now in the order of Melchizedek, when you start operating in the order of the hands of men, circumcising the flesh, Messiah becomes of no use to you, because then you need to do the whole Torah. And what he's saying is you need a temple, you need a Levitical priesthood that's been cleansed, that's been waived, that's been set apart, that is now equipped to serve. That Levitical priesthood Yahweh found fault with because they disobeyed and they corrupted themselves. So therefore, in the order of Melchizedek, which the Levitical priesthood was always supposed to be a shadow picture of, because it's always been about the righteous high priest and king forever, we see that he now came in the flesh of man to reestablish a proper order of service, bringing about a completion of the sign of the covenant by which we are now included in the nation of Israel, where we were once excluded. Ephesians 2 says, by the blood of Messiah, we have now been grafted in. You do not get grafted in by your own blood. And so I make it very clear today that if anybody says they must get circumcised in the flesh, Messiah is of no use to them. And that is a very scary place to be. The only way Messiah may become of use to them is to repent of their act of the flesh and submit wholeheartedly to the Master. There are many today that are enforcing physical circumcision within Torah observant circles today. And I warn you today, if you do that, you deny Messiah. Bottom line, finished. And most of the time, those that have been circumcised in the flesh, possibly through ignorance from wrong teaching of corrupted sources, but the corrupted sources that have caused them to be that will typically say that Yahweh is not Yeshua. It kind of goes hand in hand. And I just wanted to show a couple of pictures to highlight that even in the ancient pictographic script, there was a clear prophecy of Messiah coming in the flesh and by what we could be grafted in and become, and what is our circumcision. So yes, we do receive a circumcision, but not man's circumcision. That was always given as a sign of the covenant until the seed, that seed which is from above in the flesh of man, which is Messiah who lives forever. Now, circumcision or circumcised is when we are commanded to be circumcised for the law of the Passover, is mul, which is a mem, a vav, and a lamed. The mem is a picture of that which flows. It can represent chaos or water. It also represents blood, which cleanses. We also see here the vav, which is a picture of secure ad, and the shepherd's rod, which we've already discussed. So here we see circumcised. Now I just want to add one letter for the command to be circumcised. And here is himol, which is with the hay at the beginning. Himol, as the phrase be circumcised, the hay is a picture of a man standing with his arms raised. It represents behold, look, or sigh or reveal or revelation. Also gives us the picture of acknowledgement, lifting hands that are set apart and submitting our works of obedience to the one who's called us out of darkness. So when we see Himmel in the command to be circumcised, already we see these symbolic pictures of the coming good matters of the Master. Behold and look to him through our immersion, passing through the waters, has secured us and brought us near to the covenants of promise in which we submit to the good shepherd and are led by him. So already it's about our immersion in him that gives us a fulfillment of the fact that when people say, have you been circumcised? And I say, yes, in Messiah, but not physically. And I'm not going to let you check. Okay? Because it's a heart issue. Because you might think it's crude, but I'm telling you, there are people that were running behind Shaul that were coming with their knives and saying, you better be circumcised. And that's what the whole debate was in Acts 15. And so we understand the power of us recognizing our immersion in Messiah gives us a circumcision that allows us to fulfill the law of the Passover and, more importantly, perform the Passover. Now, what's worth making mention of in this passage, in the instruction of performing the Pesach, from verses 2 to 14, perform the Pesach is used 11 times. 11 times. So emphasis here is on performing. Now, the Hebrew word perform is asa, which is to do or to make or to perform, to observe, to celebrate. Now, it's a celebration when we are doers of the word. In other words, we're told you better do the Passover. Okay? And so we understand the joy it is to perform the feast. And part of the laws of the Passover is that we eat lamb, bitter herbs, and unleavened bread. We have a night of watches, which means we stay awake the whole night. It's that night of watches for all the children of Israel, for all generations. And we retell the story of the Exodus. That's the simplicity of that. Our Master came and he gave a new ordinance in the renewal of the covenant in the order of Melchizedek to also partake of the cup and the bread to remind us of the body and blood of Messiah. Because unless we partake in him, so we don't just go through a ritualistic observance of the Passover, we perform it according to the laws of the Passover, and we don't perform it according to the laws of man by following 15-step Haggadahs or storytelling process that has elements that have no regard for the body of Messiah, and rather bring in the commands of men that defile, like the 9-light menorah. So I just wanted to highlight a simple term of being circumcised in our Master is an immersion that's a requirement. Many people want to debate, should I be immersed, shouldn't I be immersed? Listen, if you want to be a part of the body, you need immersion. That's why when they were saying on Shavuot, what shall we do? Or whenever, even when Cornelius and saw the Spirit, and when Kepha saw the Spirit poured out on Cornelius and his household, he commanded them to be immersed. Because he could see that the Spirit was clearly, they were showing fruits of repentance, but they needed to be grafted in. And the only way you grafted in and become identified as a body of Messiah and able to serve and perform is by being immersed in the name of Yeshua Messiah. And then we see that in this, the law of the Passover, there were some who couldn't perform it, so they came and they said to Moshe, well, why aren't we allowed to do it? Blah, blah, blah. So the grumbling already started. So Moshe calmly said, wait and let me ask Yahweh. And I think just reading that today struck me again. A lot of people debate, but it says this in the word. And when they don't agree with something in the word, they don't wait to hear the explanation of the word. They just go off and do what they want. So I find this is a wonderful text here to show us that when we come, because we don't understand something in the Torah, we need to wait and let the Torah be explained to us. And how's it going to be explained to us? By those the Master has appointed to bring, as in the days of Ezra, when the Torah was read, many people might have known what's going on here. And then there were those that were appointed to bring understanding and explain what the Torah is saying. But most people don't actually want the explanation. Every week, what I'm doing here now is the expanding and explanation of the Torah. Most people don't want it. It's too boring. It's too long. It's too much information, because they just want to do what they want to do anyway. Now, in this command, it was clearly made clear that if you are unclean, you perform the Pesach on the 15th of the second month. And if you're away on a long journey, then you also do it that on the 15th of the second month, and you observe the laws of the Pesach. Now, what's clear when we look at their journey in this Torah portion as they go out, they went out on the 24th of the second month, they departed into their journey when the cloud moved. This shows us that anybody that had in that time not kept the Passover for either being unclean or on a long journey, what they did is they kept the Passover meal and a night of watches on the 15th of the second month, but they didn't have another 7 days of unleavened bread in the second month, because then they wouldn't begin to count to a different Shavuot. All they're doing is they are having another remembrance meal. Anybody who is not on a long journey and is not defiled and doesn't keep the Passover is cut off in the order of Melchizedek. We have absolutely no excuse not to be clean for the Passover meal. So people today have made excuses to their own destruction of saying things like, well, you know, I can't get leave and I can't do a night of watches, or I've got something on, I've got this to do, and I've got a whatever it is, something of the flesh. So I can't keep the Passover this month, but I'll keep it next month. Can't use that. This is not a Torah instruction that gives you license to decide, because maybe you need an operation I've already scheduled, so I'm going to do Passover next month. No, it doesn't work like that. In Messiah, this is a law, part of the laws of the Passover, but we understand now that, remember, when one was defiled, there was a whole process of animals and bloods presenting to the priests and everything else that had to come with that. They were shadow pictures of the coming good matters of our Master. We can come to the Master and get cleansed and perform his Passover. So if we neglect the ability to keep the Passover when we should, we can't then go, or when we don't agree on calendars, so we'll rather keep it twice, or I'm not sure, I missed it last month, so I'll do it this month. That shows uncleanness in a sense of proper submission. So we cannot use this Torah portion to make an excuse to have, I believe firmly that there is no second Passover in a second month now in the body of Messiah. You know? And then we come to the section of the cloud from verses 15 to 22. As I said, the instruction of perform the Passover is 11 times. In this section, we see cloud being mentioned 11 times. So in this short section of 7 or 8 verses, the emphasis here is the cloud, because it's always about the cloud. It represented Yahweh's presence. He is the cloud rider that we are waiting to see coming, riding on the clouds to receive us. And so this command was given that you only depart when the cloud departs. And when the cloud stays, you don't depart, you stay. The repetition of this is evident, and it emphasizes us to be critical in being a people who go when he says go and stay when he says stay. All too often, people come and go as they please, in type. They don't think to seek Yahweh, they don't think to hear his voice. And in the process, they often find themselves in a position of doubt, fear, worries. They get frustrated and they lose their shalom. So many people will jump the gun. How many times have you seen people in the past you've maybe tried to give a bit of advice to? Not that you're saying you must do what I say, but give it, and they don't listen. They just run off, and then they find themselves in troublesome situations. Rush into something when they rather should have waited. And on the other hand, sometimes people just don't get off where they're sitting when they should, and they're lazy and don't do what they should and go where they should go. So we see a wonderful picture here of the Passover and the performance in that, and linking to Yahweh's cloud, retaining his presence. Because everything here is about maintaining Yahweh's presence and giving that assurance of protection. The Hebrew word for cloud is anan. It means a cloud or a visible mass. We understand what a cloud looks like. It's very clear. It represented the very presence of Yahweh, but it also represented more than just his presence, but what his presence brings. We are under the cloud of his authority, so to speak. We are covered, we are protected. The cloud of covering represents his very presence that protects, provides, shelters, brings safety. And to move or stay where the cloud is not is a simple picture of rebellion. And opening oneself up for attack and chaos and disorder. So it represents being unsubmissive, rendering one outside of his covering protection, which leaves you exposed for an enemy that is seeking to destroy you. And what's worth taking note of, as I said, this connection in this chapter for me of doing the Passover and the cloud 11 times, because doing the Passover is almost like, for a cyclical pattern, it's the kickstart for obedience for everything. Now, every Sabbath we must do, but it's this idea of the performance of obedience will ensure that you're always under his cloud. At the mouth of Yahweh, by the hand of Moshe. At the mouth, it says by the hand of Moshe is a picture of guarding the commands that's given through the Torah of Moshe. We can see our ability to go when we need to go and stay when we need to stay. It becomes more apparent. It becomes more secure when our identity in the one whom we are submitting to becomes the very life of our lives. In doing this, we find ourselves sojourning under the sure protection of the blood of Yeshua, and it's at the mouth of Yahweh by the hand of Moshe. When people say, I heard Yahweh say to me, but it doesn't line up with the Torah, then how do you know that's Yahweh's word? Many times to a rebellious nation, Yahweh said, rebuke the prophets who are prophesying peace when there is no peace. Rebuke the prophet who is saying, thus said Yahweh, when I have not spoken. You see, Yahweh speaks according to his word. So we see this flow of being cleansed in order to perform and do the word, to retain his presence. That's the pattern that we see through the mirror of the word in this Torah portion so long. Okay, chapter 10, all the names.
And Yahweh spoke to Moshe, saying, Make 2 silver trumpets for yourself, make them of beaten work, and you shall use them for the gathering of the congregation and for breaking camp. And when they blow both of them, all the congregation shall meet before you at the door of the tent of appointment. And if they blow one, then the leaders, the heads of the thousands of Israel, shall gather to you. And when you blow a shout, the camps that lie on the east side shall depart. And when you blow a shout the second time, then the camp that lies on the south side shall depart. They blow a shout for them to depart. And when the assembly is to be assembled, you blow, but do not shout. And the sons of Aaron the priests blow with the trumpets, and it shall be to you for a law forever throughout your generations. And when you go into battle in your land against the enemy that distresses you, then you shall shout with the trumpets, and you shall be remembered before Yahweh your Elohim, and you shall be saved from your enemies. And in the day of your gladness, in your appointed times, and at the beginning of your new moons, you shall blow the trumpets over your ascending offerings and over your slaughterings of peace offerings, and they shall be a remembrance for you before your Elohim. I am Yahweh your Elohim. And it came to be on the 20th day of the second new moon in the second year that the cloud was taken up from above the dwelling place of the witness. And the children of Israel departed, setting out from the wilderness of Sinai. And the cloud dwelt on it in the wilderness of Paran. Thus they departed the first time, according to the mouth of Yahweh by the hand of Moshe. And the banner of the camp of the children of Yehudah departed first according to their divisions. And over their army was Nachshon son of Aminadav. And over the army of the tribe of the children of Yisachar was Nethanel son of Tzuar. And over the army of the tribe of the children of Zebulun was Eliav son of Chelon. And the dwelling place was taken down, and the sons of Gershon and the sons of Merari departed, bearing the dwelling place. And the banner of the camp of Reuben departed according to their divisions. And over their army was Elitzur son of Shedeur. And over the army of the tribe of the children of Shimon was Shelumiel son of Tzurishaddai. And over the army of the tribe of the children of Gad was Eliasaph the son of Deuel. And the Kehathites departed, bearing the set-apart objects, while the dwelling place was set up before they came. And the banner of the camp of the children of Ephraim departed according to their divisions. And over their army was Elishama son of Ammihud. And over the army of the tribe of the children of Manasseh was Gamliel son of Pedatsur. And over the army of the tribe of the children of Benjamin was Avidan son of Gedoni. Then the banner of the camp of the children of Dan, which formed the rear guard of all the camps, departed according to their divisions. And over their army was Achiezer son of Ammishaddai. And over the army of the tribe of the children of Asher was Pagiel son of Ochran. And over the army of the tribe of the children of Naphtali was Achiah the son of Enan. Such was the order of setting out of the children of Israel according to their divisions when they departed. And Moshe said to Chovav the son of Reuel the Midianite, Moshe's father-in-law, "We are setting out for the place of which Yahweh said, I give it to you. Come with us, and we shall do good to you, for Yahweh has spoken good concerning Israel." And he replied to him, "I am not going, but I am going to my own land and to my relatives." Then he said, "Please do not leave us, because you know how we are to camp in the wilderness, and you shall be our eyes. And it shall be, when you go with us, then it shall be that whatever good Yahweh does to us, the same we shall do to you." So they set out from the mountain of Yahweh on a journey of 3 days. And the ark of the covenant of Yahweh went before them for the 3 days' journey, to seek out a resting place for them. And the cloud of Yahweh was above them by day when they went out from the camp. And it came to be, whenever the ark set out, that Moshe said, "Rise up, O Yahweh, and let your enemies be scattered, and let those who hate you flee before you." And when it rested, he said, "Return, O Yahweh, for the countless thousands of Israel." To the count, sorry.
Okay, so here we see the silver trumpets that were to be sounded in order to bring a distinct sound in the camp and what would take place. And the silver, as we know in Scripture, is a picture of redemption, highlights very valuable pictures in us in terms of the work of our Master and the price that he paid. And we also see in Shemot, the silver of atonement is something that clearly references for us the price that was paid by our Master. The tabernacle stood on sockets of silver. Both our Master and Yosef were sold for silver. And so silver also speaks of the giving of oneself, ultimately reflecting the perfect work of our Master. And so we realize that with these silver trumpets that were to be made, it's a clear witness of the sound that is distinctly heard and acknowledged by those who truly obey the command and guard the word as commanded. Now, here we're told to blow the trumpets or blow the shofar on the day of our gladness, on the appointed times, the feasts of Yahweh, as well as the new moons, and on all our ascending offerings. I'm mentioning this verse 10 here because I was asked, I think it was last week or the week before, there is a Tehillah which says, blow the shofar, Tehillah 81 verse 3, blow the shofar on the new moon and on the day of the covering. This is a law for Israel forever. And a lot of times, well, I was asked the question, is this blowing the new moon only on the 7th month? Because some have taught this. And I quoted them this verse. Because here it's clear you blow the shofar on the new moons, every new moon. Yes, we know that the 7th new moon is a marker of time for the 7th month as one that's identified as a set-apart day. But our blowing of the shofar is on the new moons, along with the offerings that were brought, and it's blown over the ascending offerings. It's blown over the day of our gladness. So when we look at this pattern, in type, we are able to blow the shofar every day. But there's specific times where we identify certain markers. Did you want to say something?
No, this is specifically trumpets.
Yes, but then verse 10, where are we here? That you blow your trumpets over the new moon, yes. Yeah, yes. There's a difference between trumpet and a shofar, but what we understand here is in the instruction in 81 verse 3, blow a shofar over the new moon, it's in line with that which is blown on the new moon, and it's instruction in terms of marking the time. We realize that while we might not have silver trumpets to blow today as a nation of priesthood, we do have the ability to sound the shofar, the ram's horn, as a clear witness and sound of rejoicing in the Master. And when we understand the joy of what it is in the Master to make this distinct sound, Shaul asks in Corinthians, when an indistinct sound is heard, what will the people do? And the answer is they'll do nothing. And in Amos, our Master says, a lion has roared, but who is listening? Because the people don't know the true sound of our Master. And all of this is about order. And this command that's given for the silver trumpets that were to be blown and the specific order, when you blow both of them, everyone comes. And if you blow one, that's when the leaders would come. And then there would be a specific sound that when there's a departure. And this is how you depart. And they depart according to the way they were camped. And what we take note of here in this departure order, you first had the east side depart first. Then you had Gershon and Merari. They were the ones bearing the dwelling place, which we looked at over the last couple of weeks. Then you had the south side, headed by Reuben. Then the Kehathites, bearing the Ark of the Witness and the set-apart objects. Then you had the west side, led by Ephraim, the north side, led by Dan. We'll come to that shortly. What we take note of here is, I mentioned before we read this chapter on the 24th of the second month, it's the 20th of the second month, so apologies for that. The point I wanted to make is that there weren't people sitting around saying, well, we mustn't eat leaven for 7 days. Those that didn't perform the Pesach performed the Pesach on the 15th of the second month, and they were ready to move out because they just did it for the 15th of the second month. And so they went from the wilderness of Sinai. Now, in this journey, this was the first time they departed with the cloud of Yahweh and at the silver trumpets, and as an appointed priesthood that set apart everything was set in place. They'd been a year at Mount Sinai, departed from Mitzrayim, came. They've now received everything to equip them on their journey. And this is the first time they're departing. They're now leaving. The Hebrew word for from the wilderness of Sinai is Bemiɗbar. Sinai, coming from Midbar, which is wilderness or uninhabited land. We've discussed what Bemiɗbar means, or Midbar, coming from the word davar, which is mouth, and Sinai, which is thorny. What we see here is they had learned a lot of what they should do. Now the test was going to come. Are they going to obey as they walk? Because it's one thing to hear instructions. It's another thing to start walking according to it, you know. And so it was at this place, Sinai, the thorny place, where they received the instructions. And sometimes, or possibly all the time, when we first receive a new instruction, it kind of feels like it pricks us the wrong way, maybe like a thorn, you know. And as we grow in maturity, it becomes less of that. It becomes more of a protective hedge, understanding the protection that we have in the Master. So here they are now instructed to go out. And as they departed, I love this text again, just as the last chapter, according to the mouth of Yahweh by the hand of Moshe. Twice in this Torah portion we've seen that. And for me, this is the wonderful witness of two witnesses confirming a matter. The mouth of Yahweh is by the hand of Moshe. So when people say, Yahweh told me to, but yet it's not according to the working of the Torah of Moshe, then it's clearly not by the mouth of Yahweh. Now, this is a severe warning because, you know, you can't tell somebody a voice they heard is not the voice they think that they heard. You can say, I don't think it's, but how do you, if you didn't hear it, how do you hear somebody audibly saying, Yahweh told me, but meanwhile what they are told to do doesn't fit in line with the doing of the Torah? Then they need to be told that this is not the spirit of Yahweh. This is not the voice of Yahweh. The voice of Yahweh breaks cedars. It makes the deer give birth, you know. Now, people often hear a voice that satisfies their flesh and their desires. And just as Israel was saying, thus said Yahweh, when Yahweh had not spoken, so many people today are doing the same thing. The way to know people is by their fruits, but to identify if it's the voice of Yahweh. If it's the mouth of Yahweh that's spoken, look to the plumb line of the working of the obedience according to the Torah of Moshe. And then when you can put the two together, it can be confirmation that this is the mouth of Yahweh at the hand of Moshe. So, as I mentioned, this departure order, east, Gershon, Merari, south, Kehathites, west, and then north, what we see in this order of departure is that the banner of the camp of Yehuda that would go out first. Yehuda, we know, means praised. The north side, that would be the rear guard of the camp of Israel, was headed up by Dan, which is judge. And I like this picture because it teaches us wonderful lessons as we sojourn in the wilderness, so to speak, waiting for our master to return. We are always to go forward in praise. You know, Yehuda means praised. So when we start our journey with praise, praise, I've often said, is the spearhead of our offensive, and when I say that's not offensive, our walk of We're not defensive all the time. We're on the offensive, if you will. We're not being offended. We're on the offensive, which means we're I don't want to.
You take
Yes, you're taking ground and you're going forward in the fight. Okay, hope I get that right. So we are always to be going forward in praise and rejoicing, guarding his orders, walking in his instructions. This is when we realize that we are hemmed in, so to speak, by his righteousness, his right and just judgments. And when we continually offer up the praise to the one who is to be praised, the righteous judge, we have the assurance that he's got our back, so to speak. He's got us covered completely. In our call to come out and be clean, we take note that the promise of Elohim being the one who goes before us, and also being the one who is the one to be praised, and also being our rear guard. In verse 25, we're told that the banner of the camp of Dan formed the rear guard. Now, the Hebrew word for rear guard is asaf. It comes from the root asaf. And asaf actually means to be gathered, to be assembled, to be brought into or association with others. It means to put together and also means to be rear guard. So in other words, it's keeping the association. It's not just, okay, you're at the back, you'll just fizzle out and filter away, you know. It's written in the pi'il verb tense, which is the intensive or intentional action, and it carries the meaning of gathering in or rear guard. And this is the same root word that we see being used in the promise given to us in Yeshayahu. Isaiah 52 verse 11 to 12 says, turn aside, come out from there, touch not the unclean, is what Shaul was quoting. Come out of her midst, be clean, you who bear the vessels of Yahweh, for you shall not come out in haste, nor go in flight. For Yahweh is going before you, and the Elohim of Israel is your rear guard. So in other words, you're not going out in a panic. When Yahweh says come out, he calls us out in order. When they came out of Mitzrayim, they came out in fives. They came out in order. Did you want to share something?
No, I mean, this obviously for the silver trumpets were for the Levites.
Yes.
For specifically, like you say, in order. If the Levite blows the trumpet, everyone knows.
Yes.
If he blows it once, we do this. If he blows it twice, the shofar is for everyone.
Yes, that's a good
So,
word.
if anyone can blow a shofar anytime, if
Yes.
you type in shofar in
Yes,
you
yeah.
you can see it wasn't specific to the Levites,
Yeah.
but the trumpets
Was to the Levites, yes.
which is exactly the point. It's orderly.
Yes,
It's not anybody just deciding, okay, let's go blow the trumpet, I want to leave.
well, actually, I like what you're saying there because it ties in again in the order of Melchizedek. We look at this pattern. It's Yahweh's appointed ones that have the authority to either call leaders together or call the entire congregation together. It's not for everyone to be calling a gathering. In terms of the appointments of our master and the gathering of the set apart ones. But what's happening today is everyone's being, maybe what Colleen is saying is in type, it's as if everyone's blowing the silver trumpet.
It's creating chaos.
Yeah. And the order seems to be lost when everyone should actually be equipped to blow the shofar because it's the equipping sound of rejoicing and celebration. But the one who calls the order is the appointed ones. Does it make sense? I think this is what helps us guard our redemption that's been given as a gift so that it will be made complete. His gathering of us to himself, it teaches us a valuable lesson that he goes before us, he fights for us, he's got our backs too. We understand that when the trumpets are blown in the heavens, it's a declaration of him coming to gather us. Ultimately, it's all about the gathering, and he comes to fight and he gathers. So even in the order of their following the cloud, there was always this pivotal picture reminding us how important it is to stay in the master. Sometimes people might have had their nose out of joint. Why didn't I get to go first? Because perhaps in their journey, we know that the tabernacle would always be positioned in a proper order of east, south, west, north, because it had to be that, so it understands, and they camped that way. But going out, what if their journey didn't always go east, but it went from one place and it went west, so you'd have to go round. And some people in the west might have thought, well, why couldn't we go out? We had to wait for everybody. It's order. That's what it teaches us all the time. Yahweh's all about order, you know. Okay, chapter 11. We start to learn some issues on order.
And it came to be, when the people were as complainers, it was evil in the ears of Yahweh. And Yahweh heard it, and his displeasure burned. And the fire of Yahweh burned among them, and consumed those in the outskirts of the camp. And the people cried out to Moshe, and Moshe prayed to Yahweh, and the fire died down. Then he called the name of the place Tavera, because the fire of Yahweh had burned among them. And the mixed multitude who were in their midst lusted greatly. So the children of Israel also wept again and said, Who is giving us meat to eat? We remember the fish which we ate without cost in Mitzrayim, the cucumbers and the melons and the leeks and the onions and the garlic. But now our being is dried up. There is naught to look at but this manna. Now the manna was like coriander seed, and its appearance like the appearance of bdellium. The people went about and gathered it, ground it in millstones or beat it in the mortar, and cooked it in a pot, and made cakes of it. And its taste was as the taste of cakes baked with oil. And when the dew fell on the camp at night, the manna fell on it. And Moshe heard the people weeping throughout their clans, each man at the door of his tent. And the displeasure of Yahweh burned exceedingly, and in the eyes of Moshe it was evil. So Moshe said to Yahweh, Why have you done evil to your servant? And why have I not found favor in your eyes, to put the burden of all these people on me? Was it I who conceived all these people? Was it I who brought them forth, that you should say to me, Carry them in your bosom, as the foster father carries a nursing child, to the land which you swore to their fathers? Where am I to get meat to give to all these people? For they weep before me, saying, Give us meat to eat. I am unable to bear all these people alone, because the burden is too heavy for me. And if you are doing this to me, kill me, please kill me, if I have found favor in your eyes, and let me not see my evil. Then Yahweh said to Moshe, Gather to me 70 men of the elders of Israel, whom you know to be the elders of the people and officers over them, and bring them to the tent of appointment, and let them stand there with you. And I shall come down and speak with you there, and shall take of the spirit that is on you, and put on them. And they shall bear the burden of the people with you, so that you do not bear it yourself alone. And say to the people, Set yourselves apart for tomorrow, and you shall eat meat, because you have wept in the hearing of Yahweh, saying, Who is giving us meat to eat? For it was well with us in Mitzrayim. And Yahweh shall give you meat, and you shall eat. You are going to eat, not 1 day, nor 2 days, nor 5 days, nor 10 days, nor 20 days, but for a new moon of days, until it comes out of your nostrils, and becomes an abomination to you, because you have rejected Yahweh who is among you, and have wept before him, saying, Why did we come up out of Mitzrayim? And Moshe said, The people in whose midst I am are 600,000 men on foot, and you have said, I give them meat to eat for a new moon of days. Could flocks and herds be slain for them, to be sufficient for them? Or could all the fish of the sea be gathered together for them, to be sufficient for them? And Yahweh said to Moshe, Is the arm of Yahweh too short? Now see whether my word meets you or not. And Moshe went out and spoke to the people the words of Yahweh. And he gathered the 70 men of the elders of the people, and placed them around the tent. And Yahweh came down in the cloud, and spoke to him, and took of the spirit that was upon him, and placed the same upon the 70 elders. And it came to be, when the Spirit rested upon them, that they prophesied, but did not continue. However, 2 men had remained in the camp. The name of one was Eldad, and the name of the other Medad. And the Spirit rested upon them. Now they were among those listed, but did not go out to the tent, and they prophesied in the camp. And a young man ran and informed Moshe, and said, Eldad and Medad are prophesying in the camp. And Yehoshua son of Nun, Moshe's assistant from his youth, answered and said, Moshe my master, forbid them. Then Moshe said to him, Are you jealous for my sake? Oh, that all the people of Yahweh were prophets, that Yahweh would put his spirit upon them. And Moshe returned to the camp, both he and the elders of Israel. And a wind went forth from Yahweh, and it brought quail from the sea, and let them fall beside the camp, about a day's journey on this side, and about a day's journey on the other side, all around the camp, and about 2 cubits above the surface of the ground. And the people were up all that day and all that night, and all the next day, and gathered the quail. He who has least gathered 10 chomers, and they spread them out for themselves all around the camp. The meat was still between their teeth, before it was chewed, and the wrath of Yahweh burned against the people. And Yahweh struck the people with an exceeding great plague. Then he called the name of that place Kivroth Chata'avah, because they were buried there. They buried the people who had lusted. From Kivroth Chata'avah the people set out for Chatzeroth, and they were at Chatzeroth.
Okay, as I said, the people had just left the wilderness of Sinai. They go on a 3-day journey and they come to a place of rest. They'd received the great promises of Elohim. They have been given a clear standard for living, to maintain his cloud, to maintain his presence, if you will. And it's at this point they start to complain. They'd been, as I said, they'd been a year at Mount Sinai. They'd been given instructions on how to worship, how to draw near, who is to do the service, what's supposed to happen, how you're supposed to camp, what you're supposed to do. And they go on a bit of a journey, their first journey, and they don't like it anymore. What was there to complain about? They were in the sure and secure safety of Yahweh. Maybe already a year later, they forgot how bad it was in Mitzrayim. We aren't given specifics regarding what they were murmuring about. However, the words that were expressed were for them being clearly discontent, if you will, with the difficulties that were connected to traveling in the wilderness. This sounds familiar for a lot of people today. You know, a lot of people complaining in their walk because of some of the difficulties that they have to face as they embark on being strangers and pilgrims in this world. The children of Israel were a little resentful that they had to move. I mean, yes, they went out in haste from Mitzrayim, but they'd been comfortably dwelling at Mount Sinai for a year. Now suddenly they have to go, and it's, you know, weren't used to setting up, breaking down, setting up, breaking down. Now they're going out. And, you know, maybe some of them didn't have time to plan because they just received the instructions on if the cloud moves, now the cloud moves. It was, give us a moment, please. You know, like how many people would, maybe that's what someone was saying. The fact that we are not given the reason that they complained is a lesson for us in telling us very clearly, stay away from all kinds of complaining, because if it gave that, people would limit it to that and think they have license to complain on other things. The Hebrew word that's translated as complain is anan, which is very similar to the word that we see being used for cloud. Now, complain is with the aleph, a nun and a nun, and cloud is with the ayin, a nun and a nun. And I like this idea because two words that have the same phonetic sounding, one meaning cloud and one meaning complain, those who were actually resistant to following the cloud were the ones complaining. So if you're not under the cloud, you have no protection and you get complaining about it. You know, that's kind of like the maths. Now, anan, to complain, is with the aleph. Now, in the pictographic of text or pictographic text, the aleph is a picture of the head of an ox, which represents chief strength, etc. Now, the ayin is a picture of an eye, which means look at, knowledge. So the cloud, I like the idea of this because the cloud already, and the difference between the two is, where are your eyes fixed? If they are looking to the cloud when it moves, then they will go. And when we're looking to the Prince, Leader, and Perfecter of our faith, we're able to throw off everything that entangles, and we can run this race with perseverance. And when you're running with endurance, you're not thinking about anything else except running, you know? Because when any of you done a little bit of exercise in your life? And when you go for a little jog, you know, typically what happens is, or if you're on the treadmill because you don't like the hills of the streets, you know, and you're on there on the treadmill and you don't feel like putting some effort in and you just go through the motions, your mind wanders off. But when you are focused and you're really trying to go for it, you're focused on what you're doing. Now, that's the same thing here. When you take your eyes off the master, you start to think about other things that you shouldn't have even been thinking about. Oh, I remember the leeks and the garlic, you know. I mean, there's nothing wrong with onions, leeks, and garlics, okay? Great flavorsome things in food, okay? It was the problem that they were just thinking about what they were eating, but forgot about the conditions that they were eating it in. And so they were complaining, and this complaining actually was a murmuring. And what murmuring and complaining led to was, we want to go back to where we came from. We don't like this journey anymore. And that's how a lot of people feel maybe after a year of walking in the Torah. Don't like this food anymore. You know, it was better for me when I was enslaved. They might as well say that, because that's exactly what these complainers were saying without saying it. What caused them to complain was being bitter toward Yahweh's provision. And that is a very dangerous, that's insult to Yahweh. That's grieving his spirit. Yahweh heard their murmuring. Moshe didn't, but Yahweh did, because Yahweh hears everything. And it was evil in Yahweh's eyes. I mean, this angered Yahweh. You know? And when we understand this, we need to realize that we must be on guard against grumbling about Yahweh's perfect provision over our lives. Complaining reveals ingratitude for Yahweh's care. This word anan, to be complainers, is only used twice in Scripture. Wow, it's not a word that's frequently used, because it's not something Yahweh likes to see happening. The other time that it's used is in Echa, or Lamentations 3 verse 39. And this was a book where Yirmiyahu was crying out about the problems that were happening in Yehuda because they weren't listening to Yahweh and were going into captivity for not listening. And he says, what? Should mankind complain, a living man, because of his sins? But isn't that what we've all sinned and fallen short? So what has anybody got to complain about when they receive the gift of Yahweh and life? Most seem to grumble and murmur when they're actually in the wrong. Israel had everything they needed. And above everything that they needed, they had Yahweh's presence, confirmed by the pillar of fire by night and the cloud by day. They neglected that covering, and they sought to find their own pleasures in the flesh. They complained about what they didn't have. They then resorted to reminding themselves of what they once had. Because if you've never had anything, how do you know what it's like? You know, and they complained about what they used to have, and they complained about what they had at the time. So complained about what they didn't have, complained about what they used to have, and complained about what they had. Isn't that what a lot of people tend to do today? Have you ever found yourself complaining like this? Think about it. Break it down. You don't have what you want. You don't have what you used to have. And you don't like what you have now. The danger of this kind of complaining and moaning about your circumstances is that it can be very infectious. It's contagious. Your complaining will affect others, especially, you know what, unless you're having a pity party or one and you're just complaining to yourself, but typically people complain to others, you know. Shaul reminds us in Philippians 2 to do all without grumbling and disputings, in order that you be blameless and faultless, children of Elohim without blemish in the midst of a crooked and perverse generation, among whom you shine as lights in the world. What a fitting passage for what we're talking about today, about shining the light, about keeping the garments clean. Don't grumble and complain, because when you do, you're not shining light. You're actually incapable of being a light of the world when you complain. When you complain, you switch off the light, because you actually neglect to see in the darkness of your complaining what Yahweh actually has given you. Now, you all know the Greek words that we see for grumblings and complainings. The word for grumblings here is gogusmos. It means a muttering, a murmuring, a complaint. And every time we go through this section in the Torah, we get familiar with these words because it reminds us, and we can joke a little bit about the words, but it's actually a reminder for us because it comes from the verb goguzo, which means to mutter, murmur, grumble, or complain. And when you mutter or grumbling, it's always normally under the voice. It's like nobody can really hear what you're saying. So, you know. Now, why I'm saying is it's not a foreign language. It's grumbling. Now, this verb in the Greek is known as an onomatopoeic word. Poic word. Onomatopoeic word. Onomatopoeic. Thank you. Phew. You know, it doesn't matter how many times I try to do it, I seem to get it right the third time. Okay? And it's actually, what it means is it's a word that's derived from the sound that's made when murmuring or muttering in a low and indistinct voice with the idea of complaining. In other words, you just want to moan, but it's just like, you don't know what I'm going through. It's formed, a word like this is formed as an imitation of a natural sound. Another example is the word buzz, which is a word that's used to describe the sound that a bee makes. Buzz, you know, that kind of idea. So when you're complaining and you gogusmo or goguso or gogusmos, there's all these different nouns and verbs in the Greek. It really gives it that idea of, you know, what are you saying? If you've got no valuable words to say in uplifting others and esteeming the master, keep your mouth shut. You know, according to the Merriam-Webster's dictionary, the word grumble is described as follows: to mutter in discontent, or to growl or rumble. In other words, have you ever heard people complaining? It's like they're starting their engine. They're really getting geared up. You know, they're really trying to get you on their side. Get in the car. Come on this journey with me. Don't get in the car. Okay? I hope you're able to see why I'm trying to give you all these definitions, you know, because I want to highlight, to be a grumbler doesn't look nice, it doesn't sound nice. Now, some people might like those V8 engines, okay? But they take a lot of fuel. It costs a lot, okay? Using a whole lot of pictures, some might like, some might not like. Please don't grumble about it, you know? When we consider what a grumbler is, it's often done as a result of rebellion to authority. That's what it comes down to, because you don't want to do what's required. Or you don't like what you're being told to do or what's being given to you as a responsibility. The Greek word that's translated as disputings, when we should do all without grumblings and disputings, is dialogismos, which means reasonings, arguments, disputing, speculations. There's so many people today that aren't willing to spend the time meditating on the Torah day and night, so they speculate. So they do all their reasonings. They're speculating. Yes, yeah, I think the word says this, but, and they speculate or debate over matters of the Torah that they have no idea of. And they're bringing in the food from their enslavement. Because there are certain things in the enslavement that are inherently not wrong, like leeks, garlic, onions. They're not wrong. Fish, there's nothing wrong with those things. They're good to eat. And we liken that now to being taught from a corrupt place of enslavement, and people want to bring some of those notions of that food that they were eating there and try and present it as a complaint of why they're not getting the same when they're told to obey the Torah. You know, the Greek word without is choris. It means to be without, to be independent, to be separated, to be apart. Shaul makes it clear: do everything without disputing or grumbling. Everything. Not some things, everything. And when we pause to consider all these words, we must ask ourselves, are we adhering to these teachings or not? Or do we find ourselves grumbling? As I said, if you grumble and mutter in discontentment, you aren't actually shining because you're not representing Yahweh's presence. 1 Corinthians 10, verse 10 to 12, Shaul says, neither grumble as some of them grumbled and were destroyed by the destroyer. And all of these came upon them as examples and were written as a warning for us, on whom the ends of the ages have come, so that he who thinks he stands, let him take heed lest he fall. Let's not get destroyed because we think we're standing, but maybe in our lives there's been a bit of grumbling under the breath, because we're just not happy with we're not content with the way things are. Sorry, I don't like that word. What we need to take note of, Shaul is saying these things that we're going through here are actually warnings for us. That's why a lot of people don't like reading the Torah and what happens in the history of the journey of a covenanted people when they broke the Torah, because they're warnings for us. What happens when you grumble? What happens when you complain? What happens when you disobey? It's to make us remember that we think we're standing. Oh, no, I'm fine. Ephraim says, oh, no, you won't find any sin in me in the book of Hosea. A simple dove feeding on wind. The Greek word for warning is nouthesia. It means admonition, instruction, and warning. And it's understood as being any word of encouragement or reproof which leads to correct behavior. So we actually need warnings. Most people don't like to hear the warnings. As an instruction, this Greek word carries the understanding of teaching of proper behavior and belief. As an admonition, it's understood as being rebuked for a wrong that's done. And as a warning, it's used to advise on the consequences of wrong action. Perhaps this word could be understood in all three ways, as it teaches firstly what the proper and correct behavior is expected of us. At the same time, it brings about a severe rebuke for any grumbling that might have been done, as well as bringing a severe warning if the grumbling is not stopped. Along with this instruction, warning, and admonition not to grumble, we take note that we are also not to be wise in our own eyes. It's a clear warning that's given to anyone who thinks they're okay when they don't want to submit to proper order. We need to be standing in the Master, not standing in ourselves. It's a difference that many people will find when the storms come and they find that they're standing on sand, Because if you do, you will fall. But when you're on the rock of our deliverance, you will be standing firm. Now, what's very clear here, this complainers, in Yehuda 1 verse 16, there's a severe warning that's given against those who pervert the favor of Elohim and deny Yeshua Messiah and blaspheme like unreasoning beasts. Yehuda tells us that these are grumblers, complainers, walking according to their own lusts, and their mouth speaks proudly, admiring the faces of others for the sake of gain. So they're only in the crowd because they want something out of it. And the Greek word that's translated here as grumblers is gogustes, which means a murmurer or a grumbler coming from goguzo. All the goguzos and the gogustos and the gogusmos, things that shouldn't be apparent in our lives. Now, the Greek word that's translated here as complainers is memsi-moiros, which means complaining of one's lot, being discontent, being querulous, or querulous, which is a word that is described as habitual complaining. In other words, you're just in the habit of complaining. And isn't there a lot of people that actually, they've got nothing to complain about, but they don't know what else to talk about. So, how's the weather? Well, you know what's going on. And, it's like, how's the weather kicks the complaining going, Everyone must be on guard against complaining. There are a lot of people that always have something to moan about in their lives. Even if they come in on the Shabbat, oh, I'm just so glad it's about Shabbat. You just don't know. Oh, this and that. And they carry on. And it's always the same stories. When we pour our complaints to Yahweh, that's not the same complaining. That is our frustrations. And that is to Yahweh. What we shouldn't be doing is complaining to others, because that kind of complaining that is contagious is not one that's seeking relief reprieve. It's not one that's seeking a solution to get out of the situation. That's one that just feels like for the sake. Complaining is often done without any other motive rather than just to complain. Seeking maybe pity, seeking to gain. Complainers and grumblers will seek to gain a crowd to justify their complaining and grumbling. Israel had nothing to complain about. David cries out, I pour out my complaint before him I tell my trouble. The Hebrew word for complaint is siach, which means complaint, musing, meditation, communication, prayer. We can bring valid, if I want to say, complaints to Yahweh. Grumbling is almost like invalid complaints. Maybe that's a better way to understand, because siach is not anan. And we need to understand that having been redeemed by the blood of Messiah, when we confess that he is our Savior, we've got nothing to complain about. We can bring our frustrations, and yes, here it's the English word complaint that I think gets confusing when I'm saying we have nothing to complain about, but give your complaint to Yahweh. Don't complain, but give complaints. It sounds weird. What are you saying? I'm kind of saying that we do find that we get in our lives frustration, and we feel like we need to moan to Yahweh, and that's okay, because it's giving it to him, lest it becomes something that festers in you, and let him lead you and give you guidance and courage to stand and face what you need to face. But when you aren't pouring out those frustrations to Yahweh, and you're going to others just to actually gain momentum in your dissatisfaction over your circumstances, that's a very poisonous position to be in. We really don't have anything to complain about, actually, in terms of Yahweh's protection, provision, guidance, comfort, shalom. But yet, we somehow, in the flesh, find it so easy to complain, and that's a troubling thing. They had covering, they had food, they had shelter. Shaul tells Timotheus in 1 Timothy 6, he says, reverence with contentment is great gain, for we brought naught into this world, and it is impossible to take any out. When we have food and covering, we shall be satisfied with these. This is part of our marriage covenant that we have with the Master. As long as we stay in covenant, he says, do not worry about what you eat, what you drink, what you wear, where you sleep. I added what you eat and drink. It's one thing, Israel had the covering of a master, and they complained, and it was evil in his eyes. They cried out to Moshe. Moshe prayed to Yahweh. Moshe basically said, listen, you told me to bring these people. I didn't make these people. Okay. And I think Moshe was asking Yahweh in his mercy, please, if I carry on with these people, I might do something I'll regret. Which he did, because he did strike the rock. Because, you got to understand. And he's saying, rather kill me. Because, he prayed to Yahweh when Yahweh sent fire, because he now knew this is it. And the fire died down. One of the things that we see here, Moshe understood what he must do in this situation, and that is to go to Yahweh. And we need to realize how important it is when things are chaotic around us. The place to go is the word of Yahweh. And more specifically, we understand the Torah of Moshe, which is the core foundation and basis, a clear witness of what it means to stand on the rock of our deliverance, by taking a firm stand and getting everything that shouldn't be on us off of us. This place of burning, Tavera means burning. This is a place where Yahweh consumed, and that he consumed those on the outskirts of the camp. And this is another lesson that we learn as we look at the mirror of the word. A lot of times, complaining happens to those that aren't really engaged in building up a community, a body together. They really don't want to put in any effort to serve one another. They don't like what's being presented, even sometimes literally the food they don't like, like Israel was here. I don't like this food. Why don't we have what we used to have, kind of thing. But they take that into their normal lives, and it's those that aren't engaged in service that have time to complain. That we spoke a couple of weeks ago or whatever when looking at Merari last week, and with Merari having the heavy duty stuff and the least amount of people and the highest percentage of their men in service, which highlights that when you're busy about the Master's things, you don't have time to be bitter and complaining and moaning and grumbling. So it's a warning sign. If you're sitting around moaning about your circumstances, it should be a warning. We've learned about what warnings we need to actually get up and serve. So before we carry on and look at the mixed multitude that lusted and what Yahweh was doing, and we carry on and look again further at how rebellion is not limited to the outskirts of the camp, but can come right into the heart of the camp, especially when we look at Miriam. We'll carry on with that after lunch, as it is lunchtime. And speaking of food and leeks and garlics and onions and all those kind of things, I don't know what you're eating today in your break, but I know it's a well-provided meal by our Master, for which you shall not grumble, but be thankful for, and we're going to give thanks for that. And we will see you guys in an hour after we pray. Let's pray. Master Yahweh, we bless you and we praise you and we thank you that we can sit here in your Torah and continue to see the joy that it is for us to receive these instructions that build us up, that warn us, that correct us, that train us in righteousness, so that we can guard your presence and have the assurance of your protection, not only covering us and giving us all that we need, but fighting for us and having our backs as we take our firm stand in you, so that we are fully equipped to shine the light of your truth in every situation, and being reminded and warned against putting out that light because we find ourselves complaining, grumbling over matters which we have no reason to. But rather, when we do find ourselves with frustrations and complaints, that we bring them to you and lay them at your feet, so that you help us to take that which you've given us to be dressed in, that we can give the proper praise that's to be brought before your face. And we thank you that we can celebrate this joy of being called out, cleansed, separated for service, with a meal that we can partake on a Sabbath, as you bring light into the house, revealing to us great matters and wonders from your Torah. We thank you that you are our provider, and for the food that we're about to eat, we give you great thanks for. In the name of Yahushua, our Messiah. Amen and amen.